Hi, hello, and welcome, everybody. It is June 25th, 2026. My name is Eric Balkman, and this is FFPC Insider Access. So good to have you aboard tonight. So excited to bring on my guest co-host tonight. You know him, you love him. We'll see him in a bit. I do want to remind everybody, if you are looking to put to use some of the advice that you'll hear tonight, from both myself and our guest co-host, check out the FFPC. MyFFPC.com is your home for the Big Gorilla, $1 million grand prize, $350 to enter that. Don't forget about the 7 Bananas promo, where you can win free FFPC teams just by getting the 7 pick consecutive times. We are offering $600 each off each additional main event team that you get. So after you get your first one, you're going to get $600 off each one. After that, $1 million grand prize there, slow and live drafts popping off. The FFPC Best Ball Tournament has a $400,000 grand prize this year, as opposed to $300,000, which is what it was last year. Still get $100K for being the runner-up there as well. The Superflex Best Ball Tournament, compete for $100K at just a $35 entry. If you want to play in a managed league like the Big Gorilla, check out the Baby Gorilla. Just $125 to enter there, and you're still playing for a 6-figure grand prize. Of course, we had Dynasty and Empire Dynasty startups starting at $100 and going up to $2,500. We do have chop leagues. Just don't be the last place finisher in your league every single week, and you win the league. And then we offered Player One, you versus 11 smart FFPC CPU players. You can draft in minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you want. Set the speed that you want. Play Player One and win cash right now at myffpc.com. Let's bring in our trusty co-host tonight, ladies and gentlemen. You know him, you love him. He's been at Yahoo Fantasy forever, covering multiple sports here, or there, I should say. We bring him on tonight to talk a little fantasy football. You connect with him on the X at Scott_Pianowski. He is Scott Pianowski. Scott, welcome in, man. Good to see you, dude.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Eric. Getting excited for fantasy football. I mean, late June, early July, this is when leagues really start kicking off in earnest. And certainly when I start doing a lot more football prep, I'm knee deep in it right now over at Yahoo. So let's try to figure some things out in the next couple hours.
Yes, that's the goal. That's always the goal. Let's have some actionable stuff that we can take here, maybe plant some flags. And in fact, we'll be doing that tonight. Scott and I are going to go around the NFL. We'll also ask Scott questions everyone wants to know, like, is there a rookie being misdrafted by the fantasy community? Which position is the hardest to try to put our fingers on? And then in the final segment, we'll do the walk-off, which is plenty of questions, including but not limited to sophomore running backs, McCaffrey versus Achane, and then what quarterback to build your Superflex dynasty around. We'll get to that and so much more. Scott, you probably don't know this, but I'm going to tell you this right now. The last time I think you were on, you said something to me that I have quoted you dozens of times since then. And I asked you what it was like, because you're in the grind, right? You're covering fantasy year round, whatever sport it is, you're writing about it, you're covering it, you're talking about it. And I said, does that ever get to you? Does it ever seem like, oh my God, like I can't keep up. I need a break mentally. And you told me, you're like, no, it doesn't work like that. Listen, we work in the toy department. Nobody's going to feel bad for us. And it's true. And every person I've told that to since then, I got a chuckle out of that. So even when you're not on the show, the Tao of Scott Pianowski lives on.
That's good to hear. You like to leave a couple of footprints, a couple of fingerprints when you've done it as long as I have. But yeah, we do work in the toy department. When I first started in sports, I was a newspaper guy before I ended up becoming a fantasy guy. And the late, great Bill Reynolds was a columnist at the Providence Journal when I was like a de facto intern. It wasn't technically an internship, but it was basically the same type of thing for a couple of years. And he'd see me working on a story. He'd walk over to me. He'd just kind of shrug and go, "Beats having a real job, right?" I've kind of repeated that many years. And the great Bill Reynolds, by the way, go out and read Fall River Dreams, his account of Chris Herron's junior year of high school basketball. You'll also see him if you watch the Herron documentary. Unguarded is the Jonathan Hawk documentary on Chris Herron's life. There's a lot of Bill Reynolds in it. So get a handle on some of his books. He wrote a book with Rick Pitino. He's written a bunch of book on the Big East, but it's the books he wrote with Chris Herron that I like the most, the Fall River Dreams. And then he wrote a memoir of Herron's life called Basketball Junkie, which is just fantastic. So try to get some Bill Reynolds in your bookshelf if you don't have it already.
You know what's funny, Scott, is every time we talk, the list of books that I need to read, the list of movies I need to see, the list of television shows I need to watch, it always seems to grow longer after a conversation with you. But I don't mind it because you have not steered me wrong yet. We will try not to steer anybody wrong tonight with the advice that we're going to be giving. And we'll kick things off tonight. And I think that this is probably a decent way to do it. Brandon Ayuk, it's weird because I feel like to a certain extent, Scott, we've given him the Aaron Rodgers treatment, where he's still relevant to talk about, but at the same time, I don't know what kind of impact he's going to have on this 2026 season. It seems like every time I check X, he's posting something else, or on Instagram, he's got he had the one where he was just throwing money into a closet today or whatever it was. Really bizarre behavior. And I know the talent. I have him on a couple of dynasty teams. But at the same time, I'm kind of wondering, this is a dude who has not played since 2024. This is a dude that is acting pretty erratically, probably against what his agent's telling him to do on social media right now. The Niners don't seem like they're doing him any favors. I feel like he's going to get to camp late, if he gets to camp at all. Or maybe he is released shortly before the season starts, and there's not enough time to jump aboard that moving train that Mike Tomlin always talks about. And it's kind of a lost season for Ayuk. Now, he's still being drafted. I mean, I shouldn't say he's being drafted high. He's in the high double digits essentially right now, like 11th, 12th. I'll look it up in a second. But with Ayuk, sometimes I think that this is fool's gold, and I don't even know if he's worth buying low on Dynasty right now.
Yeah, I would just basically pretend that Ayuk, whatever your format is, isn't on your board. He hasn't been a fantasy relevant player since 2023, and 3 years of NFL time. They age in dog seasons, right? It's like 20 years, might as well be. As you said, the erratic behavior, he's had physical problems. We would think he'd be on a new team. I don't know how he could ever go back to the 49ers. So a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator, probably a new offensive system, players like that. And then even if you rostered him and then he ended up on a team, when would he be in shape? When would he be ready to play? How much would he have to do on the field for you to actually be comfortable in starting him on a fantasy team? It's just too much of a hurdle. I'll be the last guy to believe in Brandon Ayuk again. And when time comes, and if I'm late to that party, and if somebody won week 11 because Brandon Ayuk caught 85 yards and a touchdown, I can live with that. I just think it's going to be a lot of hurdles are going to need to be, need to be jumped over before he's relevant. And again, it's been so long. I have an expression that once the cheese goes bad, a lot of times it just never goes good again. And I wonder if, I know Ayuk isn't that old. It's just an age 20 season, 27, 28, I guess, season for him. He didn't play last year. But I just wonder if the cheese is already bad on Ayuk.
James Hicks is chiming in on YouTube right now. He's probably a problem that another one of his league mates should have, and not him, which is true.
Well said.
And it's tempting too, Scott, because I was way off. He's wide receiver 65. He's going at the 15-16 turn right now. Where at that point, we have in FFPC, we have our first roster waiver wire run coming up on early September. If at that point Ayuk's still not on a roster, or he's looking like, okay, this is not going to happen for him this year, he's an easy cut, and you're looking for the running back flavor of whatever's going on at that point. So I get it if you want to take a chance on him, but I think you're talking about such a like the longer it goes with these social media posts, and the longer it goes with him still being a Niner and not on a new team, the less likely I am.
Let me boil this down to something really simple. Okay, I understand all of our teams, bottom quarter of our roster, they're all speculation plays, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys aren't good enough to play right away. I mean, if they had that kind of value, you would draft them a lot earlier. But what you need is a quicker developing Polaroid. He's a slow developing Polaroid. Okay, he's somebody who you take the picture, you got to take it to the film place, they have to develop it, you come back and get it in a week. We don't have time for that. We need a story that's going to show itself really quickly, good or bad, and then we can make a decision. We know how important those waiver wire moves are in September, getting ahead of the new trends and players who come out of nowhere. And every year there's somebody who was undrafted who is viable right away. We want to be flexible for those guys. And this is a story that's going to take too long to develop. It's not that IU can't be valuable. Again, I mean, I'm voting against it, but I at least see the case for it. The problem is it just takes too long for that picture to become whole. I don't want to wait for that.
I think he's got a new nickname now. I think Ayuk is going to be Polaroid now on the FFPC.
Polaroid, I like it.
Which makes sense. You need the iPhone camera picks in round 15, round 16, round 17, where you know what they are right away. And if they're not, you move on to the next guy. So wise words there. Brenton Strange, this is, I feel like 60% of my offseason talk, Scott, has been on the Jaguars, whether it's Travis Hunter, whether it's the other receivers, whether it's the backfield. And now we're throwing Brenton Strange into this pepper into the gumbo as well. 3-year contract extension worth up to $48 million, $25 million guaranteed. Now, if we go back to 2024, 40 catches, 400 yards. Okay, solid. And then last year, he missed 5 games and had 46 catches for 540 yards. So it seems like he is trending in the right direction as far as his dynasty value, as far as his redraft value, quite frankly, where you can get him in drafts. I was of the opinion that this was going to be the final year of his rookie deal. I was of the opinion when the Jaguars invested into not 1 but 2 tight ends in the draft, I thought Strange was walking and he would be signing somewhere else. Now we get a definitive declaration from Jacksonville, from James Gladstone, that yes, he is a part of this team despite all these talented pass catchers we have with Hunter, Washington, Myers, Thomas. You got the backfield of Rodriguez and Tootin. But Strange factors into this as well. How much, I shouldn't say how much did it surprise you seeing this contract, but how much have you modified the way you feel about Brenton Strange in fantasy now that the Jaguars are putting some serious cash behind him?
We have to remember the tight end, they wear a lot of hats in an offense. They're also used as blockers, they used as movable chess pieces. The problem for me with Strange for fantasy is just, as you mentioned, their wide receiver room is particularly deep. Strange last year, you get 60 targets in 12 games. It's about 5 a week. So that would prorate to about 85 in a full season. Jacoby Myers makes a living off a part of the field that Strange would like to command. And it's just, he's never going to be the primary guy there. And you also have to factor in they have multiple backs who will touch the ball. Trevor Lawrence will probably run for 300 to 500 yards and maybe a handful of touchdowns as well. We like investing in Liam Cohen offense. And if this wide receiver room was a little bit more condensed, I could get behind Strange, paid, age 26 season, with a quarterback on the rise, a coordinator / head coach who we like. But I just think there's too many guys in front of him. I'm fine with Strange. Look, you need to take a second or third tight end. You're playing in a tight end premium format, something like that. He should be on a roster. There's a path for him having a step forward or maybe even a breakout season. But that would be like, oh, yeah, Parker Washington got hurt or Travis Hunter became a full-time defensive player or they couldn't unlock Brian Thomas. What the heck do we do with him this year? He's more of a reactive pick than a proactive pick. A proactive pick is I'm going to get it in your way. I'm going to step in Eric's way and take this guy because I want him. That's a proactive pick. A reactive pick is the whole room is shrugging at Brenton Strange. He's around past his ADP, or maybe he even add his ADP, but he fits my roster needs. I'm okay with it. I'm just not going to elbow anybody out of the way for Strange.
He's not, and even in a tight end premium format like the FFPC Big Gorilla, Scott, tight end 18 right now. So he's not expensive at all. You can get him in the 11th round. He's going right behind Okonkwo and Gadsden. He's going right ahead of Juwan Johnson and Sadiq. Strange is, and I feel like, I think, I don't know if it's Theo Greminger or somebody put this in my head. As far as tight ends, we're always looking at somebody, maybe it was JJ Zachary, I can't remember, but we're always looking at these tight ends that can be the number 2 option on their team, right? Those are the ones we want to target. Those are the ones we want to draft. And I feel like where does Strange rank? I don't know, Scott, but I know it's not top 2 on Jacksonville. It can't be.
And I also want to mention some of the other tight ends in that bucket that you mentioned. Okonkwo and Juwan Johnson are proactive picks for me. Washington, I don't know. We know they've been linked to possibly getting Ayuk, but their wide receiver room looks awfully thin. I think finally Okonkwo could spread his wings, changing teams. We've been waiting for him to pop for a while. And Juwan Johnson had another guy follow the money, right? He got the big bag last year, had a really great season. And they're, can Olave stay healthy? We know Tyler Shuck was better than anybody expected last year. When it comes down to making the tight end pick in that area and those guys were available, I'd probably lean towards Okonkwo or Johnson over Strange in that position.
I've been getting a lot of Juwan Johnson as my second tight end this year. I feel like, and I'll look it up right now.
Tight end 8 last year, something like that. He was really good last year.
It was a crazy season. It was, and you know what? You know what's funny? It actually wasn't a crazy season. I remember saying this last year when he got off to that big start. I was like, wow, this is really surprising, Juwan Johnson. But then I was like, God, the Saints did pay him. They told us how they felt about him before the season started. This should not be a surprise. Juwan Johnson last year saw over 100 targets, 77 catches, just shy of 900 yards, finds the end zone 3 times. And I'll just say this, because I know there's people that will tell me that, the Saints added Jordan Tyson in the first round of the draft. They added Oscar Delp, a player who's probably a little bit more athletic and a player that they probably view as the future at tight end in this offense. You bring up Olave. So I'll just say this to the Juwan Johnson haters. Mm-hmm. If Chris Olave stays healthy all season, if Jordan Tyson stays healthy all season, the guy who's been battling hamstring injuries through his final collegiate season, and if Oscar Delp somehow finds a way to have that first year rookie tight end impact, then yeah, maybe Johnson's not a good pick. But I don't see all 3 of those things happening. I think there's still an easy clearing of a path to see that Juwan Johnson's going to have another big season, Scott, and pay off a tight end, whatever I said it was, tight end 19 right now. Yeah, tight end 19 value in the 11th round. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, this is a kind of player that I call a regress and win player, where he was a top 10 tight end last year. Nobody expects that to repeat, but he can have a worse season and still be a value at his ADP, right? I mean, like last year, guy for Broncos. Why am I
Evan Engram?
No, their primary receiver.
Oh, Cortland Sutton,
of course. He was a regressive win player last year, where he was coming off like a wide receiver 12 or 14 season. He was being drafted around wide receiver 32, so he could get worse and still beat his ADP. And that's what we could do with Johnson here, where you can't just say, a lot of people want to talk. Regression is a very important concept in fantasy sports. We talk about all the time fantasy baseball. We talk about all the time the fantasy football. This rate's going to regress. This usage is going to regress. This level of production is going to regress. But regression starts the conversation. It's not a mic drop. You don't say, well, Juwan Johnson's not going to be as good as he was last year. I'm not drafting him. Well, the whole market is doing that. We have to say, is he going to regress so much that I don't want him at the inexpensive price that you're quoting? And I think he's a screaming value. He's your second tight end, maybe even your third tight end in some builds. And I think he's going to pay it off because, again, he can get a lot worse than he was last year and still be a value. And there's a path to maybe he gets 100 targets again. And the Saints last year, Shuck was better than expected. Kellen Moore was a hire that we like. You want to feel good about your play caller. They play at a fast pace. I think the Saints could even be competitive, and we know what's kind of the clown car of the NFL, right? I mean, last year a losing team gets to the playoffs in the Panthers, and the Saints were the most fun team for fantasy of all those teams at the end of the season, depending on how you feel about what Kyle Pitts did. But Bijan Robinson also went off in week 17. But the Saints were fun at the end of the last year. Let's just say that. So I find myself, this was an offense a couple of years ago I didn't want any part of. I didn't really know what to make of them last year because I wasn't sure who the quarterback was. Mm-hmm. Because Shuck, I guess he's a right answer. I think Kellen Moore definitely is a right answer. It's I'm going to be overweight this year on Juwan Johnson. It's not like I'm coming in my draft with a Juwan Johnson shirt on, and I'll probably draft him on a lot of teams where I'm not starting him in September. That doesn't matter. I think he's priced to be a nice value. You need depth. You're going to have to, the bottom half of your roster is going to have to play. And sometimes the bottom half of your roster ends up being better than the top half of your roster. That's been the story of my fantasy baseball season, by the way, where my 17th round Otto Lopez's are playing better than my third round picks. This is not a fantasy baseball show, but I'm just saying that sometimes you live in the upside down, and that's why you want depth. And that's why Juwan Johnson is a great target in the second half of your draft.
That always irritates me, like whether it's fantasy baseball, fantasy football. I hate it when I nail these sleepers, Scott, and yet I'm busting out with my early round picks. And it's like, God, if I just wasn't so stupid in the front part of it and picked a better player, my teams would be in much better
when
shape.
You go to the steakhouse, the salad's unbelievable,
right?
And the drinks are unbelievable, and then your steak isn't any good. It's like, geez, if I had a good steak here, I'd be having a great season.
You talk about the logic you just applied to Juwan Johnson. I know this isn't on the show sheet, but I want to ask you about Saquon Barkley, because Barkley was a player last year he was coming off the massive 2024 season, right? And he was going 103 on average in most FFPC drafts. Then he has a season, which, I mean, I'll bring this up because it's going to help prove my point. If you look at his stats from 2025, last season, you look at Barkley and what he did. Rushing yards in 2025 for Philly, over 1,100, 7 touchdowns, catching the ball. He had, where am I seeing it now? 37 catches, 273 yards, gets another 2 touchdowns there. Okay. You don't love that for the 103, but I understand, it happens. He's coming off a massive season. This year, Scott, if we look at how FFPC players are treating Saquon Barkley, a player who was basically the offensive MVP in 2024. In 2025, he was the 103. Now you can get him at the 206 in FFPC Big Gorilla drafts as the 10th running back off the board. He's a borderline top 10 running back. I feel like the hate's gone too far on Barkley, and I feel like he's easily going to pay that off. I've been reaching. I've been kind of grabbing him at that 1-2 turn sometimes because I feel like the sky's the limit. New offensive coordinator coming in. We didn't even mention that. The Kevin Patullo disaster is behind us. I think there's a lot to like about Barkley here, and I feel like people are letting him fall too far in drafts right now.
The stat I keep coming back to in that 2024 season, and look, unbelievable year. I mean, 2,000-yard rushing seasons are pretty rare things. He averaged 29.4 yards per touchdown in 2024, which for a running back is a ridiculous number. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe he had any 1-yard touchdowns that year where Hurts was gobbling up all the cheapies. Barkley was scoring from distance. So again, we knew that was going to regress. He was an easy fade for me last year because he was drafted, as you mentioned, the top half of the first round in any league. I just didn't see how he could match that. A lot of moving parts here. Hurts is not the same proactive runner that he used to be. Obviously, A.J. Brown isn't there anymore. They've totally retooled the receiver room. It seems like they have a new play caller every year in Philadelphia. A lot of that has been the burden of being a good team. You get rated. But this time it's actually because of performance, because the offense was disappointing last year. Barkley, what is it, the 9th season, I want to say, for Barkley. So he's getting up there at age 29. You get a little bit nervous. But it's a thing I was prepared for when the draft season started. I was thinking, okay, Barkley's going to go around the turn. I don't know how I feel about that. He is squarely in the second round. And I haven't been I've had draft slots where he maybe hasn't made sense. So you're picking early in the first round. You're not going to take him then. You get in the second round, he's gone. But I'm open-minded to Barkley. I'm not going to label him proactive. I'm not going to label him reactive. I'm going to label him as just somebody who, look, here's the thing. You can rank your guys. You can plot out your strategy as much as you want, but you won't really find out how you feel about any of this until you get into the room and the bullets are flying and the clock is ticking down. And that's where you actually feel the rubber meets the road and you actually start to feel how you view these guys, and push comes to shove, A versus B, where you're going to go. I'm open-minded to Barkley being on my team. I wasn't going to draft him last year, and it wasn't hard to say regression, but I agree with you. I think the market possibly has overcorrected for a season that wasn't that bad. And just he ran pure for touchdowns 2 years ago. He was unlucky last year. New coordinator, the offensive line should be good. Again, the Eagles are going to be a good football team. And with that wide receiver room maybe taking time to grow because it's young, maybe it means Barkley gets a little bit more of the work, a little bit more of the touchdown equity. So I think he makes a lot of sense in the second round this year.
The other thing to consider too, in regards to Barkley, with the vibes in preseason and training camp, let's see what the players and the coaches are saying now that they don't have the A.J. Brown cloud hanging over them. Mm-hmm. Let's see if that really is lifting everybody there. Let's see what they're saying about Sean Mannion, because then you could see Barkley creep up where he normally is going at that 1-2 turn. That wouldn't surprise me either.
They were the most unhappy good team last year, right? And look, I don't want to blame it all on A.J. Brown, but it just seemed like Brown and his teammates were never really on the same page. It hurts a lot of times. We'd have a sourpuss, whatever it means. Hurts and Brown didn't get along. But what's convenient? You see this a lot of times where a team will be underperforming for a coach or a coordinator, and that coordinator will get fired. And I think sometimes what happens is everybody realizes, okay, that was our scapegoat. We're going to blame it all on him. Now we better play better, or it's on us, right? Yeah. Well, if A.J. Brown was the guy who was pissing in the Kool-Aid, well, he's gone now. You guys got to play better, or if the coordinator change, if that's the reason why the team underperformed last year, well, that excuse is gone. I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles had a nice bounce back season. And again, it's not that these guys aren't drafted, lofty positions, but I think they might be a little bit underserved right now in the fantasy market.
I think Philly is going to be a team to watch. I want to bring it back to Jacksonville and talk about Brian Thomas with you, Scott. Cameron Wolf from ESPN reported that BTJ is going to be used, quote, on vertical routes in 2026. The other quote from Wolf, that's where they believe he can take that next step. We've heard a lot of reports, multiple reports, Scott, coming out of Jacksonville, that the chemistry with Lawrence and Thomas is better. Remember, Thomas was really crushing and had that big breakout season with a lot of Mac Jones, not Trevor Lawrence throwing to him. So improving the chemistry is obviously paramount to Thomas getting back to that 2024 level. He averaged 14.3 air yards per target, led the Jaguars in air yards when he was healthy. And in 2020, I mean, this is good that we're hearing. This is another positive story from Thomas. My concern here is, if we look at it from a glass half empty standpoint, if he's going to be used on vertical routes, is he going to be the Matt Harmon sacrificial X, right? Where we see Myers, where we see Washington, where we see Strange, right? And Thomas is doing a lot of wind sprints where, his average depth of target is going to go up and everything, so on and so forth. But maybe his targets go down. And dare I say, does he just become like a big play, best ball only type guy? I don't know, because this is a former first round pick who looked awesome, looked unbelievable in 2024. And now I hear this. I think you could take it two different ways that, some people are looking at this as a good thing. I'm not so sure given the other talent and the complementary skills of the other receivers on this team with Thomas.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up my colleague, Matt Harmon, who, as we all know, just locks himself in a vault and grades and ranks and watches and film room, understands receivers, I think, better than anybody in the fantasy space. And you mentioned sacrificial X. When you were talking, even before you mentioned Matt's name, I was thinking of another Matt Harmon term, which is layup targets. What's a layup target? That's the bubble screen. That's your 2-yard hitch. That's the easy, let's get the receiver in a rhythm. Let's get a short completion. Let's get his hands on the ball. Let's get him into the flow of the game, which is not what Brian Thomas is slated to do right now. He's going to be running the cardio routes, running downfield, and it's going to be Myers. It's going to be Washington. It's going to be the running backs. It could be some sprinkling of Strange. I'm not saying they could never use Thomas on these routes, but when I think of a star receiver, what I want is the easiest path for him to get his hands on the ball. Yeah, we'd all love our players to run a 9 route and score a 70-yard touchdown. Those plays don't happen that much. I want the easiest path to a nice baseline, a floor where like every week I'm getting that 4 or 5 reception drumbeat. And when he goes off, I get 7 to 10 catches. Maybe I get multiple touchdowns. Maybe he goes over 100 yards. I'm worried with Thomas. Receiver's a boomer bust position anyway, but I'm worried that he's going to be more towards that boomer bust side. You mentioned him as a best ball pick. I fell in love with Thomas his rookie year. Even in a season, if you had told me that Jacksonville would have the season they had, that Lawrence would become almost like a quasi MVP candidate, they'd become a hot team in the second half of the year, and Thomas would ostensibly be healthy for most of the season, I think, okay, was Thomas wide receiver 3, wide receiver 7? What happened? And really the floor fell out for him. He seems like he might be a square peg in a round hole here. I want to see him running the entire route tree. I understand why they're not leaning towards that right now. I thought after last year I'd probably be buying off the market, giving me Thomas at a good price, but I don't like the vibes right now. I think he's set up to be a fantasy failure again.
I think that he could transform in his game into better in real life than in fantasy, right? Because he could definitely serve a purpose, opening a lot of stuff up for Washington and Myers and Strange, so on and so forth there. But that wouldn't necessarily create a great fantasy season for him. The other thing too, last year is Travis Hunter went down. And so Hunter was out the majority of the second half of the year, and Thomas still couldn't get going. So it was one thing. It was a very frustrating season for Thomas next year. And I think when you talk about, is he closer to 2024 or 2025? Obviously, it's somewhere in the middle. I'm leaning closer to 2025 rather than 2024, especially in this offense and his role going forward. We mentioned Strange, excuse me, the tight end from the Jaguars earlier signing an extension. He wasn't the only one, Scott, who signed an extension this week. Kyle Pitts is now in Atlanta for another 3 years, $54 million extension, $36 million guaranteed. They had the franchise tag placed on him. He was ready to play under that for this season. He won't have to worry about that now. He is just behind George Kittle and Trey McBride as far as average annual value on his contract, and he looks like a slam dunk. Well, if you include Bijan Robinson, I guess a slam dunk top 3 target in Atlanta, but maybe a top 2 target there with Drake London too. The other thing, or the thing with Pitts is he's coming off a really good season. Like obviously his rookie year, Scott, was the best season he's had in his career, but last season was close. And I wonder if people are still a little bit feeling snake bit about Pitts. and they're letting him slip a little bit more because this is an uber athletic tight end that has not yet reached his prime, and people are taking him in the 6th round of FFPC tight end premium big gorilla drafts as the 6th tight end off the board. I think there's a lot to like about Pitts, but perhaps if we're going to talk about Pitts, we have to talk about the quarterback situation in Atlanta as well, because that's going to affect him.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I think people are willing to forgive Pitts. Now, it's his 6th NFL season, and I feel like everybody in your league would have been burned by Pitts at one point. He was drafted earlier than any tight end in history. He had all the yards that rookie year. He couldn't score a touchdown in America. I believe his one touchdown was in Europe. He's never been really a big touchdown guy. And it looked like maybe the Pitts story was kind of over. And then last year's second half of the year, especially that final quarter of the year, he was really cooking. But what's keeping his ADP down? Look, London's here, Robinson's here, but it's still a very condensed Atlanta offense. It's going to be 3 main targets, and then the 4th target in this offense could maybe get 50 or 60 looks. They're going to be concentrated with the 3 guys, but we don't know if Michael Penix can play. We don't know if Tua Tagovailoa can play and / stay healthy. Kevin Stefanski was basically run out of town in Cleveland. Now he's the guy in charge here, so people can spin that as the glass half full or half empty, as you were saying earlier. But Pitts, I like the career trajectory. I like the pedigree. I mean, he's had a couple of monster seasons, and we've seen him, that Thursday night game he had where I think he scored 3 touchdowns. He was like 170 yards or something like that. A guy who can be the best player on the field. He was that day, and that's a big statement when you're sharing a field with London and Robinson. The bottom line is this. I don't love the quarterback room, but I mean, I don't think it's going to be like the worst quarterback room in the league either. I think it can be good enough. And as long as they don't have a receiver, unless there's somebody on this roster that I'm grossly understating who can step up to be a dynamic number 2 receiver, I think Pitts right now, he had 118 targets last year. I don't see why he wouldn't get 100 plus. Not many tight ends are going to get to that area. I think he's set up to be a really nice value. You mentioned, I think it was round 6 in a tight end premium format. Yeah, I'll sign that check all day.
There's a report that you reminded me of something here, and I want to make sure I'm getting this right so I'm not feeding false information. Oh, yeah. So Josh Kendall, who covers the Falcons for The Athletic, wrote 2 days ago that if the Falcons make an offseason move, it probably might come at wide receiver, right? Because they have Zachariah Branch, who's kind of getting the layup targets, as Matt Harmon would say, at Georgia. Now he's probably going to be getting those in Atlanta. Jahan Dotson, Olamide Zaccheaus, there's not a whole lot to threaten defenses with there, right? The issue here is, what if they sign Deebo Samuel? What if they sign Stephon Diggs? What if they sign Keenan Allen or somebody like that? How does that affect Pitts? Certainly it wouldn't be great. But maybe it'd be an interesting buying opportunity because he would slip even further in drafts at that point.
I laugh when you say Keenan Allen's name because I spend the entire offseason just hoping he doesn't go back to the Chargers.
Right.
I want Lad McConkey to be on all my teams, and I'm drinking all that Mike McDaniel Kool-Aid, the classic. He's a Wade Phillips type of guy where you don't really, or Josh McDaniels is like this too. You don't love him as a head coach. You love him as a coordinator. I can't wait to see Mike McDaniel get his hands on the Chargers. That offense can be healthy. Last year, their offensive line got hurt right when the season started. The fact that they even made the playoffs with everything that went wrong last year. Anyway, I don't want Keenan Allen back there. Go to maybe Miami where they desperately need some wide receiver help. I don't want him to go to Atlanta. This is, again, that narrow concentration that we love for fantasy. Keenan Allen is capable of just getting in the way. You'll never want to play him for fantasy, but he's going to go to some team. He's going to catch 63 passes for 621 yards and 5 touchdowns. And every one of them, somebody's going to be like, I need that to go to somebody else. And it went to Keenan Allen. So he's had a nice career, a little short of a Hall of Fame career, but a very good career. But I don't want to see him go to a team like Atlanta where they have the concentration just the way I like it.
I that thought about him going to the Chargers again has invaded my mind over the course of the last couple of months. The one saving grace, Scott, I just don't think Allen is a Mike McDaniel guy. He pounded the table for Brendan Thompson at the NFL draft. They got him. He's a big speed guy. They kind of got to let Trey Harris develop. I'm with you. I think McConkey has a nice big year. It seems like Quentin Johnston, maybe not the truest form of living up to his draft pedigree in the NFL draft, but he certainly plays a significant role on that offense and makes everybody better. I don't know if there's any room for Keenan Allen and what he does for Mike McDaniel to exploit him, or I don't think he necessarily makes anybody better. By the way, I just looked this up. He is 13th all time in the NFL all-time catch list, which is, if he does sign this year and he catches, let's say, 40 balls, he would move up to 7th. I guess he would move up to 8th because Travis Kelce's ahead of him. And I don't think he would outcatch Travis Kelce this year, but you never know. But it's crazy to think about because Allen has always been, like you said, he's the Hall of Very Good. And it'd be weird that if he does make it into the top 10 all time in catches, I don't think anybody's clamoring for him to get to the Hall of Fame. But it'll be an interesting conversation when he decides to hang it up. Because
let me put one more period in here as we talk about McConkey and Johnson and Harris, and we'll see if they get anything out of Thompson, a couple of interesting tight ends with the Chargers. Mike McDaniel. If you wait a quarterback, if you're not going to be in on the vanity QBs, I think Justin Herbert is a screaming target.
Totally.
He's a guy I want. There's some others, but Herbert is somebody who I know I'm going to be overweight on when the draft season is over.
The quarterback for the Chargers currently going, he's moved up a little bit. He's quarterback 8 right now at the 908. But it's interesting, Scott, because he used to be more in that Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott tier. And he is knocking on the door of both Jalen Hurts and Caleb Williams, who's actually slipped a little bit here. And Jalen Hurts has been slipping. But Herbert could easily move up to quarterback 6 here shortly. And then Jaden Daniels would be next for him to pass. He's about a little over a round behind him right now.
Let me ask you, again, not on the script, but Daniels worries me. I wish he had more at receiver. He missed so much of last season. He still kind of feeling his way as a passer. So much of his great rookie year was made with his legs. I'm not considering him at his current ADP. What's your state of the Daniels address?
Yeah, I've been avoiding him. The reason, so I know he was hurt last year. That's going to happen. But let's look at what Washington's done. They have a first-year offensive coordinator, never called plays before, and David Blau. Now, certainly the stuff I've read, Scott, is he was widely respected around the NFL, like a rising star. Okay, so maybe he pays off. But he's still a first-year offensive coordinator. They really, right now, who's their number 2 wide receiver? Is it rookie Antonio Williams? That's not great for Jaden Daniels. And then it's not like they have a big bull in the backfield like Derrick Henry they can ride. They might be going running back by committee. And I don't know about you, but Katron Allen, Rashad White, Jerome Ford, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, none of these guys require game planning by opposing defensive coordinators. So I see a lot of ways where it ends up badly for Jaden Daniels this year. And if Daniels is the quarterback 5 in the mid-8th round, I'm finding a better way to spend that pick. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. He'd have to fall quite a bit for me to start drafting.
Yeah, that's my takeaway. I think the market would have to correct before Daniels becomes somebody who I'm going to be drafting. The
tight end discussion continues here as we move from Kyle Pitts to Tucker Kraft, who is, according to Matt Schneidman, who covers the Green Bay Packers for The Athletic, he believes Kraft is probably going to start training camp on the PUP list. Kraft admitted as much, but both Schneidman and Kraft think that he's going to be ready to go week 1. The thing with Kraft this year is, and I know he was crushing it as far as where he stood stats-wise among tight ends when he tore his ACL last year against Carolina. I brought this up on the shows multiple times, Scott. He was doing that without Christian Watson. He was doing that without Jaden Reed. And the efficiency and how hot he ran last year as far as like big plays and touchdowns. It's kind of like what we said about Barkley. He's just not replicable. So for him now to come off an ACL injury where we know sometimes it takes these guys longer, like they could still play on it, but they're not capital letters themselves until the following year. That worries me. I know that it's more of a concentrated concentrated passing game now in Green Bay with no Romeo Doubs, no Dontavian Wicks. But at the same time, there are some talented guys there. And Kraft, I worry that he used to be, I just drafted him last night, so I shouldn't say like I'm totally off of him. But tight end 7 at the 603 right now. Again, this is in Fannin, Pitts, Laporta territory. I don't know if Kraft pays that off. I feel like people are drafting him, myself included, more at his ceiling, and I could see this going bad, not badly, but not good enough to pay off that ADP.
I think those are wise words of caution, and this is all very emotional for me because Tucker Kraft was probably my most drafted player last year. I know Justin Boone, my colleague at Yahoo, was big on him. I think Harmon might have been in on Kraft too. So we basically had like a Tucker Kraft block party all summer. And he's smashing 2 months in, he looks like the right answer at tight end when you combine production and when he was drafted. We're all feeling great. He gets hurt, ACL. I think a lot of people right now are just grinding out how great his efficiency stats are, and look at that yards per catch, and he gets downfield, and that's all great. How healthy is he on opening day? How healthy is he for the balance of 2026? I think he's set up to be a disappointment this year. You mentioned a lot of his production last year. It was at least helped by Watson and Reed not being available. One of my favorite stats is since Devontae Adams left Green Bay, nobody has gone past 100 targets. There's one of the receivers got to 100 one year, but it's been a total just sprinkling here, there, rotational players and everything. Now, I think LaFleur is a very good coach. I think the best coaches are going to get their scheme to fit the talent, not force their talent to play. I use this scheme all the time. I rotate guys. If people are good enough to be on the field all the time, he's going to adjust. And the way they've handled their payments in the wide receiver room, you would think some adjustment's going to come there. But I don't want to assume that Kraft is back to 100%. And a lot of people will say, well, so what? I'm going to make the playoffs and he's going to be great in November and December. That's what matters to me. I think we underestimate how important it is to get off to a good start, to be 3-1, 4-0, 5-2, something like that, where you can make moves with leverage and you can make moves that you want to make, not moves you have to make as you're trying to survive. So it's great that, okay, you're in the playoffs every year and you're going to crush in December. I want to get off to that fast start. Kraft doesn't fit that. I think the market is excited about what his production has been, but is underestimating just what the rust factor may be, or maybe even the composition of that passing game changing a little bit. So I agree with you. I like Kraft, and I can't wait to have him maybe next year. And even if I don't have him this year and he breaks out, at least I'll think, okay, I was a year early on that. But I think he's a little bit mispriced right now and probably somebody I'm set up to avoid. Although you make a great point. You were concerned about Kraft, maybe throwing some cold water, but again, you get into the room, the bullets are flying.
Yeah.
You got into a position where my roster build, what's available. You can't, a lot of times we talk about, it's not about the players, it's about the prices, or maybe it's about your roster build. Maybe it's about the shape of the room and the competition, because rooms are going to draft differently. Your hometown buddies may draft differently than a expert league or a industry league or a league online where you don't know anybody. So you need to be open-minded to pivoting. This stuff is all written in pencil, but I think I'm going to be probably out on Kraft this year.
The other thing to note about Kraft is he strikes me as a player, Scott, that as we get closer to the start of the NFL season, I think a lot of the stuff that's going to be talked about by beat writers, by fans, by drafters, it's going to be positive. Oh, Kraft looks great. I mean, he's already been posting stuff on Instagram. Yeah, he looks like a Greek god right now with how much he's been working out. How does that translate to football? I don't know. But there's a lot of people excited about that. I feel like he's the type of person that the hype is going to build, where you're not going to get a discount on him. Like there's not going to be people like us, or at least there's not going to be a lot of people like us that are talking about, well, what if it doesn't go right for Kraft? What if everything doesn't fall into place? And as a result, I think he either stays the same or he ascends up the draft board, which you and I are out on.
I also want to say something. You talk about like the drum beat of, oh, he looks good, he did this, he did that. Coach speak, summer quotes and all that. Mm-hmm. Believe every negative thing you hear and be very judicious about how much you believe in the positive. We are wired to go, unless you're the absolute heel of heels. These beat writers, they go there, they want to see positive stories. They have relationships with the teams, with the coaches, with the players, with the agents, with the front office. You want to say positive things. We all want to. We're human beings. Tucker Kraft's a good football player. It would be great to see him play at a Pro Bowl level or a fantasy needle moving level, which he was doing last year for 2 months. But when they say something negative, it's probably true. When they say something positive, yeah, you get thrown through the BS detector. And a strong BS detector, I've always said this, is one of the most important skills you can have in your fantasy bag.
I think of, Giannis Antetokounmpo just got traded to the Heat. And there was an article from Jim Ozarski in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that basically he had been writing for 3 years. And I think Laurie Nickel contributed to it as well. But he basically been writing about like all this behind the scenes stuff that was going on with the front office, with the Antetokounmpo, with the coaching staff, with his teammates or whatever. And this finally gets published, and it's a novel. I mean, it is really good, really extensive, great stuff. But he waited until after Antetokounmpo was gone to he would never publish this stuff because, I think it's more fun for fans to read stuff, whether it's a newspaper or website or whatever, to read positive stuff about their team. Like they want to feel excited about this young wide receiver that they just drafted. They want to feel great about this up and coming running back that they just signed in free agency. That's the kind of stuff. And beat writers, like, it's like, you know, I mean, the only time I was a beat writer was 1 year in college, and I covered my college, my university football team or whatever. I wanted to write about positive stuff. I don't want to write about anything negative. It's just more fun to talk about, hey, what if this team does really good? Hey, what if this player is all conference or whatever? And I think that's the kind of thing that we apply it to fantasy, where if you hear something that's neutral or negative, you could probably believe it. But with the positive stuff, I don't know. The percentage is pretty low on that.
No, you're so right. You're so right on that. I think back to when I was in college at Providence, and Rick Barnes was the coach, and I wrote an editorial for the college paper, the Providence College Call, criticizing Barnes. He was rumored to maybe leave the program and take the Virginia job. He didn't take it. And it turns out there's some backstory that I'd become privy to with some of the people I knew at the Providence paper. And I wrote an editorial criticizing Barnes, and I got hate phone calls, crank calls, and people rapping on my window and saying, if you don't like the school, you should leave and stuff like that. Right. And a couple of years later, I was a de facto, I don't know if they called it a beat writer, but me and another guy did most of the summer baseball for the Providence Journal, covering the Pawtucket Red Sox. And why were we always around Mo Vaughn's locker? Not just because he was probably the best prospect on the team, but because we all liked him because he was such a nice guy. Mm-hmm. And you can't help it. It's a human, it's a human relationship business.
You attract more flies with honey than vinegar. Is that the phrase? I don't know. But it's something like that. So be kind is good advice there. And but again, have your spidey sense turned up for when you're reading positive puff pieces. Speaking of positive puff pieces, Scott, Lamar Jackson has said his new offensive coordinator, Declan Doyle's play calling is, quote, mind-blowing. Now, I wrote something about this in the FFPC Dynasty email that went out. I don't know how much we can critique play calling during mini camps and OTAs. So I thought that was a little weird. However, Doyle, who I found out is less than a year older than Lamar Jackson, which is crazy to think about. Everybody within the Ravens seems to be pretty positive about this guy. He's been called a human computer by the defensive coordinator by Baltimore, Anthony Weaver. Jackson said this: it's a different system than what I'm accustomed to being in, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of explosiveness this year. The way Declan Doyle calls plays and his creativity with his mind, how detailed he is, it's mind-blowing. So when we and Doyle, by the way, worked under Ben Johnson in Chicago, and I want to say I thought he had a gig working under Sean Payton before that, but don't quote me on that. I thought he did. Anyway, you think about the Ravens, Scott, and Lamar Jackson obviously hobbled last year, did not have a great year. What did they do? Well, they're bringing back Derrick Henry. They drafted 2 young wide receivers. They drafted 2 young tight ends. They let Isaiah Likely go. Obviously, Zay Flowers is still there. Rashad Bateman is still making good money to play the perimeter there. With Declan Doyle now calling the shots in Baltimore, and no John Harbaugh, too. They have Jesse Minter as the head coach, who's sort of a defensive guy. This could be a very exciting year to be in the Lamar Jackson business.
Agree. Yeah, Doyle also has a history with Sean Payton, who's one of the – so Sean Payton, Ben Johnson, these are some of the best offensive designers in the NFL. Interesting time for Jackson because he's a mobile quarterback, but he hasn't run for a lot of touchdowns in recent seasons. But again, they've changed. A fresh coat of paint is coming for Baltimore. John Harbaugh was a great coach. It was probably just time to move on amicably to something else. So a lot of different things moving around. I'm such a Zay Flowers fan, but he needs to be on the field and getting some of those shorter touchdowns for him maybe to pay off my expectations or what his ADP might be. But Jackson is still, I thought 2 years ago when Josh Allen won the MVP, I thought a lot of the stats pointed towards Jackson. I didn't have a problem with Allen winning, but if they had given it to Jackson, I would have been fine with it as well. I think they may have split the MVP and the first team AP vote that year, which is always kind of crazy. I think voters should pay. If one guy's your MVP, a quarterback, I don't know why he wouldn't be the first team, AP selection also, but sometimes they split that vote. It's kind of like the ghost of Peter King is still around as an active writer. But yeah, a lot of this year we've had more turnover than usual. The bad teams are always going to sweep out their coaches, sweep out their coordinators. But this year, so many of the good teams, right? I mean, the Steelers are generally a winning team, playoff team. You know how Mike Tomlin's story, but maybe that got a little bit stale. They've started over. Baltimore started over. So we have more turnover this year and probably more reading the tea leaves that we have to do this summer than usual, because usually it's like, okay, how do these bad teams get good? And now it's like, well, how do some of these good teams, you talked about the Eagles earlier with all the turnover with them, they're another team that's good pretty much every year, and they're changing the focus of that offense. They've gotten that repainting of the wide receiver room and really their entire offense. So I think we have more work to try to sniff out some of this stuff. And you're right to bring up Lamar Jackson as a player we have to have our spidey sense tuned to all summer.
You know, the other, okay, so obviously I want to say this about Zay Flowers before we move on. 86 catches, 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. That's awesome. And I'm with you. I'm a big Flowers fan. I have been for several years. Flowers right now, as far as his ADP goes, Scott, wide receiver 17 at the 403. I'm still willing to pay that at this point. The Tennessee Titans, I want to get to a couple of points here about them. Nick Arvin, who covers the Titans for Sports Illustrated, he thinks Wan'Dale Robinson is going to lead the Titans in scrimmage yards this season. Why is this interesting? Because that's not how they are being drafted. The Titans are being drafted in the FFPC Big Gorilla. If we look at the ADP currently over the last 5 days in the Big Gorilla, Carnell Tate's the first one off the board at the 605. Wan'Dale Robinson's not going until the end of the 9th round. Tony Pollard in between them in the early 7th. But if we talk about Tate versus Robinson, we're talking about a difference of like 3.5 rounds, roughly, Scott, between the rookie and the newly signed free agent in Robinson. What does this mean to you? Does it strike you as FFPC drafters being too bullish on Tate? Or is this more of a situation that they're sleeping on Wan'Dale Robinson?
I think they're sleeping on Robinson. The background with Dable, both of them with the Giants. I know that the rookie frame has changed in fantasy football. 2014 was the C year where all these guys popped. And since then, we've been more open-minded to these guys being good right away. But I don't want to assume it. And I realize, look, where they drafted Tate, did they draft him maybe a little bit too early? People can have their opinions on that. Sometimes you just have to take what's there, and you have to live with the shape of a draft year. They obviously needed playmakers. I'm really excited to see what Cam Ward might do now that he has some adults in the room and he has some talent to go around in this passing game, because really last year he was just working with scraps. And I thought the fact that he didn't look terrible, I realized his stats were mostly below code, anything you looked at. But the fact that he looked like a competent, bona fide NFL player despite such little help, I think is a feather in his cap. I think Ward is set up in formats where you need more than one quarterback. I think he's a really good target. You wouldn't, traditional league, you're probably not going to be using him this year, but if you need super flex, if you have a league where you can, best ball where you're just looking for somebody for down ballot scoring, Ward's a guy I have my eye on. But Robinson, not only do I think he's going to lead this team in production over the full season, but I really think it's going to be heavily slanted towards the early part of the season. I would not be surprised at all if the end of September he had more than double the amount of receiving yards as anybody else on the roster.
I think Tate is the type of player that follows the rookie wide receiver path, where he comes on at the end of the year rather than the beginning. And the other thing I come back to, Scott, and everybody wants to talk about Cam Ward's deep ball and how he loves throwing the ball down the field. And maybe that's not the greatest thing for Robinson. But I keep remembering that game last year where Russell Wilson was airing it out, and Wan'Dale Robinson, who actually was a deep playmaker in college, he was catching all these moon balls, and he had a fantastic game. And I'm like, wow. So if Robinson's adding this to his repertoire, and he gets Cam Ward throwing him to this year, people maybe really are sleeping on him, letting him go nearly to the 10th round.
Yeah, 8 for 142 and a touchdown against the Cowboys. And Russell Wilson, man, we had such a great run, and it feels like the last 3 or 4 years has been pretty ugly. It seems like he's going into broadcasting. His career is probably over. We talk about Hall of Very Good. I'm very curious to see how the Hall of Fame voters treat Russell Wilson, because I feel like 4 or 5 years ago he was on the track, and I don't know how they're going to handle the end of his career. But you make a great point about Robinson, that sometimes people talk about, he's a PPR scam, right? I mean, it's all these catches around the line of scrimmage, and no team is really worried about Robinson. They're almost in concert where they're allowing him to catch these passes because you don't lose that way. Doesn't necessarily mean he can't get downfield. Maybe he hasn't been asked to do it. You talk about the profile he had in college. I think here's the bottom line. I'm going to make it really simple. I want you to draft at his current ADP. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is a screaming guy to get.
I know I need to work more Wan'Dale Robinson into my fantasy team so far this year. Arvin, in that same report on SI, Scott also said that he thinks the Titans are going to use a more balanced committee approach in the backfield this season. Earlier, Robert Saleh said that Pollard and Spears were the two bell cows on the roster. I didn't know you could have two bell cows on a roster, but apparently Tennessee does. But then they draft Nick Singleton. You throw him into this mix as well. I guess I'll just phrase it to you like this. Who represents to you the best value in the Tennessee backfield right now? Is it Pollard in the early 7th? Is it Spears in the late 12th? Or is it Singleton in the late 15th?
I'm still a Pollard guy. I realize he's the most expensive of those guys, so you need him to produce more for the ADP to make sense. Singleton's going to take some time to develop. He'll certainly be number 3 or number 4 in the depth chart when the season ends. Because Spears, his body composition and his injury history, there's certain things with him. I don't know that he's ever – it's just funny for Robert Saleh to say he has two bell cows, because I don't think Spears could ever be a bell cow. No matter – everything would have to go wrong for him to be 25 touches a week. I don't think that's something that's in the reasonable range of outcomes. But much like Ward was reasonable last year, I thought Pollard was actually a pretty valuable fantasy player, given that the team around him was so bad. If they could have more buoyancy, more octane as an offense, just hold the ball a little bit longer, be in scoring position a little bit more. I've seen Pollard as I talk about the boring value vets in fantasy baseball. I used to call these guys the Ibanez All-Stars.
Yep.
I never really came up with a great, maybe, name for football. I mean, I thought, is it the Joseph Adai All-Stars, or I'm still kind of workshopping what it is for football. But sometimes boring value veterans, and Keenan Allen, we talked about earlier, his whole career has kind of been like that, although maybe that's expired now. But Tony Pollard, nobody's coming to your draft in the Tony Pollard jersey. He's not a hipster pick. You're not going to make that pick and have everybody, complimenting you or saying how shrewd you are, or, whatever. You're not going to win the draft room with Tony Pollard. But sometimes sometimes you have to eat your veggies and make the boring value pick with a veteran. I think Tony Pollard checks those boxes. Of the 3 backs, even with the more expectant ADP, Pollard's the ticket I want to write.
Fun fact about Raul Ibanez, Scott, he played right in my hometown of Appleton, Wisconsin back in 1993 and 1994 with the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers. So a good callback there to Raul Ibanez.
Better in his 30s than he was in his 20s.
Sometimes it works like that. Sometimes it works like that, for sure. You are aging like a fine wine in the fantasy industry. Hopefully I am too. Hopefully this show is as well. As we're going to take and step out and take our first break. When we come back, Scott Pianowski is going to answer everything that you want to know about the brooding topics over fantasy football right now. Overrated draft strategy trends, something that we learned last year that we've already forgotten, and so much more. I'm Eric Balkman. You're watching Insider Access. We'll be back in 90 seconds.
Drafting a main event team on FFPC, $2,000 entry team, grand prize of $1 million.
I'm looking for that $1 million top prize.
Main event season is in full swing.
It is time to register for the FFPC main event if you haven't done it yet. $600 off each additional team after your first one. Compete for $1 million grand prize. $1 million grand prize in the Big Gorilla as well. Don't forget about the 7 Bananas promo there. $50 off each third team that you buy there. FFPC Best Ball Tournament and Superflex Best Ball Tournament filling up as we speak. Don't forget about the Baby Gorilla, $125 to enter. Still compete for $100K grand prize. Dynasty Startups, Empire Dynasty Startups, Chop Leagues, and Player One, all available right now at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Joined tonight by Scott Pianowski at Scott_Pianowski on the X. Of course, you read all his work and check out everything he does for Yahoo Fantasy Sports. I want to, inquiring minds want to know, Scott, and we're going to drill through this tonight. Hopefully learn something. Hopefully be able to apply this to our own teams this year. Is there something that you hold right now as a strong opinion that maybe you haven't written about, maybe you haven't told anybody about, because you know it's going to draw a lot of criticism? In other words, when everybody else is zigging, are you zagging about one player, one strategy, or one aspect about fantasy football in 2026?
So last year we did a Yahoo Fantasy show in Las Vegas, and we were giving some of our hot takes and some of our bold predictions. And one of my bold predictions that the Patriots were going to be this year's Broncos. They'd win double-digit games. They'd at least beat Buffalo once. They'd be a playoff team. And they were all giving me, I think the guys were in on that to some degree, but they thought I was a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs to go to the extent that I did. Now, we know the way the season went. Drake May narrowly missed MVP. The Patriots ran really lucky with a lot of breaks, made the Super Bowl where they get absolutely demolished by Seattle, but whatever. I mean, all these things happen. Great season. May was breakout player. I think the Patriots now overdrafted. The schedule was so easy last year. It won't be as easy this year. I realize they get A.J. Brown. He's got a history with Vrabel. I think he's still the impact receiver they need, but he's not the same type of player. His skills may be somewhat diminished. The backfield's going to be a timeshare. I'm really not sure how I want to attack that backfield. Just some regression is going to kick in. This could easily be a 9-8 team, an 8-9 team, a team that misses the playoffs, a team that gives back a lot of last year's run good. So Drake May is somebody who, and also, by the way, Drake May did not realize he was a little banged up at the end of the year, but he played very poorly in the playoffs. They made the Super Bowl despite Drake May. He obviously had a great regular season, but he was very bad in the playoffs, but they were winning because their opponents, CJ Stroud played so poorly. The Broncos had to play a backup quarterback in the championship game. I think the Patriots are going to be a big regression team this year, and I'm not drafting them proactively at all.
Including playoffs, the Patriots went 16-4 last year. Their current over-under, as far as total wins go by most sports books, 9.5. So, you talk about 9-8. I think that's much more realistic than, going 14-3 would be again. And it's funny, too, because obviously people are going to bring up the Super Bowl hangover aspect of it. But, they went out and paid Romeo Doubs. They went out and traded for A.J. Brown. So they're making these significant upgrades. And certainly I think there's going to be a lot of disappointed Patriots fans, rightly or wrongly, if they don't, go over the top and win it all, or at least get back to the Super Bowl. I don't think that they will. And I think there's going to be a lot of head scratching going on in New England next year. Joe King posts this in the YouTube chat. I want to bring this up here, Scott. He's talking about these running backs that are going at the 4-5 turn, and he wants to know which one of these we're going to need to win big in 2026. He lists off Quinshon Judkins, Bashal Tutin, DeAndre Swift, Bucky Irving, David Montgomery, and Trevion Henderson. Are any of those guys, do you see right now from that list, as guys you really want to have this year to win $1 million in the FFPC?
Swift was the 4 pick. Tutin is the ceiling pick. I realize Rodriguez is obviously there in Jacksonville, but we want to bet on coordinators we like: Cohen, Johnson, and Judkins. I'm just nervous about. I know they added the receivers. They have the worst quarterback room in football. I think he's going to have a lot of games where there's boxes stacked up where Judkins had nowhere to run again, maybe back to the line of scrimmage. You're going to hear that all season, man. He's a good player. Even Sampson is going to take some of the receiving work away from him. It also makes me a little bit nervous about Fannin. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the two names that jumped out to me were Tutin and Swift.
Regarding Judkins, and I could be wrong in this, I feel like Todd Monken's offenses, they don't have like this high volume pass catching role for the running backs, right? And if Judkins is not catching passes, he's going to have to be really efficient on the ground. And if he's going to be really efficient on the ground, that probably means the Browns are going to be a pretty good team this year. And I don't necessarily see that with the quarterback, the questionable quarterback play that they have. Obviously, losing Myles Garrett was huge. I mean, I like the fact that they end up getting Jared Verse, which is going to help him, but he's no Myles Garrett. So there are, I've drafted Judkins a few times as my number 3 running back, and I feel all right about it. But I think, Scott, the reason I feel all right about it is feel like there's a deep yawning chasm after you get off that Judkins tier to the next level of running backs. And I just don't want to be focused or relying on any of those running backs below Judkins as a number 3 running back this year. Maybe that's why I like him a little bit more.
When you're drafting running backs too, you're drafting the entire offense. You're drafting a story with the team, right? Because you don't draft fantasy running backs think, oh yeah, they're going to stink, but he's going to be good, right? And if you're ever going to say that, it's probably because they're such great pass catchers, as you mentioned. That may not be something Judkins managers can rely on. So it's a case of I don't like the setup for him. I think he's a perfectly fine player, but I think the setup is going to allow him to be is going to make him an ADP loss this season.
Is there, conversely, I mean, we're talking about, Judkins not being one of our favorites here. Is there a player that you are trying to draft, whether that's early, middle, late? I mean, obviously, I think it's much easier to draft the same player late a lot. There's been a few guys that are on my list this year. Scott, what about for you? Is there a player that you're trying to get in as many drafts as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I teased it earlier. It's Ladd McConkey, who I think has been a half round to a full round mispriced, depending on when you dipped your toe into the 2026 draft pool. We saw in the second half of 2024, he showed the ability to be a dominant player. And then last year, everything went wrong. They added competition in the wide receiver room. The offensive line got hurt all pretty much on opening day. I don't know how they made the playoffs last year, but it's a head coach we like. It's a coordinator we like. It's a quarterback we like. Assuming Allen doesn't come back. And even if Allen does come back, I mean, geez, at his age, I don't know how much he's going to be in McConkey's way anyway. I think whatever you lost on Ladd McConkey, you're going to make it all back in 2026. I've already drafted him on a few teams, and I'm going to keep trying. I do think there's a chance he maybe become a helium player in August, and maybe if the price rises enough, I may have to back off it a little bit, because I do think the Chargers are a hot offense right now. I think a lot of people are excited about the coordinator change, but until that full update comes, I think McConkey's still a nice value, and I'm happy to have him as a mainstay on several of my teams.
McConkey is currently leading sort of a glut of wide receivers going in the 4th round. There's a bunch of them. McConkey is currently the first one being drafted in the 4th round. Or no, I take that back. Flowers is. But then this glut in the middle. It's McConkey, McMillan, Burden, Higgins, McLaurin, Waddle. So, and as far as, those players go, certainly everybody's got their warts there, but the 2 guys in that list that I've been drafting the most have been McConkey and McLaurin. And I like both those guys this year. I know I just got done saying I'm not a fan of Jaden Daniels, but I do think McLaurin does have a nice bounce back this year. And he's a guy I've been getting in the 4th round. There's conversely, Scott, the other side of this. Is there a player that you've been passing on that, people look at Scott Pianowski's drafts and say, what the hell is he doing? Why is he not taking him there? Is there a player that you're willing to let somebody else take that you think plenty of people are going to say you shouldn't be letting this guy slip, but that you're clearly off of in 2026?
Yeah, it's the way I've been handling the tight end board. Fannin, for many of the reasons I'm afraid of Judkins, I'm afraid of Fannin, the quarterback room, the upgraded wide receiver room. I think it might be a bad team. He's a wonderful player, and I would just love to see him on so many different teams, but he's on the Browns. And we talked about Tucker Kraft, who was probably my key player. You would have said to me this time last year, or maybe even closer to the season, what player do I need to pop to have a great season? It probably would have been Tucker Kraft. For 2 months, we got it. I think his return from the ACL is not being properly priced into his ADP. And I think people are looking at what he can do, what the explosive plays, the touchdowns, the YPC, the way they've handled the wide receiver room. Well, they paid some receivers. They seem to have a more streamlined approach there. Dobbs isn't there anymore. I think Kraft is set up to be a fantasy disappointment. I'm going to be back. I hope he is, in the sense that, look, I want all players to play at their ceilings, but if it plays out the way I expect it to, I think we're going to be back in on Kraft next year, or maybe even near the end of this season. But I'm just afraid it's going to take him too long to get it back up to full speed to justify his current price.
I think this is a more of a fantasy baseball thing. I think Ron Chandler used to. I think it was Ron Chandler who said this. But the advantages of drafting proven players coming off down years usually has a pretty nice positive result when you're doing that. More in baseball or whatever, but I think it applies to football here as well.
By the way, if you're going to play fantasy baseball and you're going to follow anything that Ron Chandler said, talks about, you're going to be a better player. I mean, I can't say enough how much I respect him as an analyst, proud to call him a friend. And I used to say that anybody in college, if you want to be better at fantasy, take economics electives, because there's going to be stuff in there that's applicable to the fantasy game and the fantasy space. If you just read Ron Chandler, even if you're not a fantasy baseball player, you're only a fantasy football player, or maybe you're picking the games, or you want to be better in your March Madness pool. He's going to teach you so much about how to think, about game theory, about market behavior. I can't say enough about. I'm so glad you mentioned him on this show, because Ron Chandler I've learned so much from him, and I think everybody else can do the same as I have.
I think sometimes it opens up our minds to other stuff when we think about, when we come at it from a different angle, where we're reading about fantasy baseball, but then we hear something about that. Like Scott White from CBS Sports, I reference this all the time when he talks about drafting injured players before the season starts. And he always says, look, your players are going to get hurt throughout the season. Why are you adding these guys that are already hurt onto your roster to start the year? Like, don't give yourself a headache. And right. I always think about that from a football standpoint. So my point is this: sometimes when you come at it from the angle of a different sport or just something different altogether, sometimes that unclicks something in our addled brains where all of a sudden we can apply that to what we need to apply it to and become better fantasy.
Yeah, my version of that Scott White tenet is, don't go looking for injuries. They're going to find you.
They're going to find you. Exactly. Yes, exactly right. Speaking of rookies, I know we weren't talking about rookies, but let's move the topic to rookies here. I have a couple of players in mind to answer this question. I don't know if you do, but I'll ask you first. Do you feel like there's a rookie that fantasy players are not handling properly in drafts right now? Are they overdrafting them? Are they underdrafting them? Is there a player out there that you see right now, Scott, that would fit that category?
Yeah, Cardinal Tate was the guy I wanted to come back to. We built the case for maybe Wan'Dale Robinson's to get in that receiver room. Maybe he's their guy. Certainly in the beginning of the season, as he has an advantage with the background with Dable. I think Tate's being an Ohio State guy, his draft pedigree, the slot that he got, the draft capital he got back in April. I think that's been a little bit misapplied to the early draft season.
It would make sense. And he's actually been rising too. So like, he's an easy guy to avoid if you don't like him, because there's Tate truthers out there that are drafting him. The two guys, I'll just say, they're both running backs. Jadarian Price is one at the 5'12" right now, running back 26. I read this report that, Mike McDonald is saying that everything's on the table, that Charbonnet could play week 1, which is crazy to me. But at the same time, Charbonnet does not have to be effective in order to ruin Jadarian Price's draft value, right? Like, he could go out there, lumber around, not be the Charbonnet we saw last year. That's still taking touches away from Price. To draft Price in the 5th round right now, you are really betting on ceiling there. And what is his ceiling? I don't know how good this guy is going to be in the NFL. Now, part of that's not his fault. He was playing behind Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame. Well, everybody's not going to look as good as Jeremiah Love did, right? So we don't know what he's going to be like. I know that Seattle likes George Halani, who they've trusted, who they won a Super Bowl with, giving him some decent amounts of touches down the stretch run last year. So I don't know if Price is going to be soaking up the volume that people think he is in the 5th round. That's one. And I'm glad Adam Hahn is not in the chat tonight, because he would fry me for saying Jonah Coleman is a guy I think people are overdrafting right now. Running back 44. End of the 11th round. I can't remember who said this, but it seems like, I think it was Ben Gretsch was writing about this. Jonah Coleman is an injury away from being an injury away from being relevant in fantasy, right? Like, I understand that Dobbins could go down. Yeah, Coleman's role is going to go up. Harvey could go down. Coleman's role is going to go up. But this is a day 3 guy. I don't think we need to necessarily be the NFL told us that he's a day 3 guy. All these teams passed on him multiple times. And now he's behind currently a healthy Dobbins and a healthy Harvey. I get it. It's round 11. There's no such thing as a bad fantasy pick after round 10. But at the same time, Coleman's not a guy I like there. So those would be the two I would say on that, Scott.
No, a lot of good intel there. Also glad you mentioned Ben Gretsch, who's one of my favorite reads in the fantasy space, and somebody I would recommend to everybody.
I read his Stealing Signals,
so
and
good.
He's so wordy on it, which I know sounds like a bad thing, but he wrote about the world. It was a fantasy football post. He was talking about I can't remember which 2 teams, but he was talking about the World Cup and sort of like the United States history in the World Cup, recent history. And I mean, it took me like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to read all the way through. I forgot I was reading about fantasy football because I was so wrapped up into him writing about this history of the U.S. men's national team. It was good stuff. And I do like reading him quite a bit as well. All right. A lesson from last year that we learned after the season ended, Scott, that it seems like, we've already forgotten, that we're already screwing things up the same way this year in drafts that we did last year. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, the thing that jumped to mind to me is that there are so many, and I realize this is not a new thing. I mean, J.J. Zacharysen's original fantasy step into the space was late round QB, and still such a great strategy. I see the ADPs, and I see Burrow going early, and May going early, and Daniels. We talked about some of the danger with him. He's going early. Hurts is still a top 10 quarterback. I think my chances of beating you with Herbert, with Dak Prescott, with Trevor Lawrence, with Brock Purdy, who's been underrated his entire life. Yep. I've seen a lot of draft rooms that want no Matthew Stafford, who's still set up for success with the Rams. Jared Goff is going to be he can't maybe be a top 5 quarterback, but he can easily be a top 10 quarterback. Indoor schedule, really good pieces there. I don't see why. I love May. I'm a Patriots guy. Love Drake May. I love Joe Burrow. He won me over for life with that LSU season and his Heisman speech, which was just so grateful. Obviously surrounded by good teammates. I don't really love the coaching. It's funny how the Bengals are the one team that didn't change their coaching staff in that division, and I still think they probably need to. But I'm not taking Burrow, May, Daniels, Hurts. To me, it's almost like the quarterback dead zone. Why you have to take those guys when everybody I see below them? And again, it doesn't matter. If you don't like Herbert as much as I do, take Dak. Take Trevor Lawrence. Take Jackson Dart if you can keep him on the field for 4 months. I'm not sure if that's doable or not, but I mean, there's certainly a case for him. I mentioned Purdy being underrated. Stafford's still a little bit underrated. There's so many guys down the list. Shuck was good down the stretch for the Saints last year. This position is so deep. If you want to say Josh Allen, he separates because of his rushing ability, I get it. If you want to talk about what Lamar Jackson could do, if he's healthy and this new scheme pomps, I get it. But I'm not going to be racing to beat everybody at quarterback. I'm going to beat them with the second and third waves of just options all over the place.
Couple of things regarding that I want to get out. So number one, I'm going to bring back a Moneyball reference, which I have been doing this strategy at quarterback for years, especially in best ball drafts, like a 28-round best ball draft where I can dedicate 3 players at the position at quarterback. I will recreate Josh Allen in the aggregate, right? We can't afford to draft Josh Allen. We can't afford to pay Jason Giambi, but we could recreate him. So then I think about, okay, well, when the top 11 or 12 quarterbacks are off the board, Scott, I could get Mahomes. I mean, he's quarterback 13 right now. You mentioned all these other guys, Goff, Shook, a guy in Kyler Murray that I've actually been drafting as my second quarterback because of the upside there and how good he could be in Minnesota. And then as my third, I mean, Cam Ward, Malik Willis, who I've been drafting a lot of. Jordan Love is going outside the top 20 quarterbacks right now. So I just feel like that is a better way to spend assets in best ball drafts, rather than taking a quarterback early. Now, here's the problem with this, and this is the second point I want to bring up. I think a lot of people are doing this now. And so when a lot of people are doing this now, I have to sort of like pivot and go back to, okay, well, now is the value in trying to get one of these elite quarterbacks actually better, right? So Josh Allen's going in the 4th round. I get it. I probably won't take him there. Lamar Jackson's he's at the back end of the 6th round. Burrow has fallen. Drake May has fallen in the 7th round. Burrow is barely in the 7th round right now. Jaden Daniels has fallen. Jalen Hurts, right? And so like now, and I don't know if this corrects itself or these guys start going higher or whatever, but now I've been in this mode the last couple of weeks where I'm kind of like, am I still doing this the right way at this point of draft season? Like, am I still doing it correctly where I'm maximizing the value on my roster? I don't know. And that's something I've been toying with right now, because normally I'm a late round quarterback guy too. I've always been. And I'm wondering if I maybe need to adjust, at least temporarily, while these quarterbacks keep falling. I wonder if that's a pivot I'm going to have to seriously consider.
I mean, I love thinking that way, right? Don't get dug in on anything, be willing to adjust as the market adjusts. I love the first thing you said. You talked about, you're getting Giambi, the great Moneyball reference where they can't replace Giambi, they'll replace him in the aggregate. I think back to, we did a fantasy football index mock draft about a month ago. Their magazine will be out soon. It's always excellent. One thing I love about the Fantasy Index, shout out to Hall of Famer Ian Allen, one of my favorite guys in the fantasy space, is he came up with the idea that let's not just do a mock draft. Let's score it. Let's make it a league. So what happens is it becomes a best ball league. And I think he might have been very early to the best ball space. I think it's even possible he may have even invented it. I'm not sure where the origins lie with that. But so the Fantasy Index draft is a draft we care about because they're going to publicize it, they're going to score it, and they're going to mention it on their website. You're going to get a little bit of run from it if you do well. So what did I do there? I drafted Herbert, who we've mentioned a lot on this show. I drafted Kyler Murray. I drafted Jordan Love. This is a league with no pickups. We're just going to run with everything we draft, and then a true best ball format. And so what do I get? 3 quarterbacks who all have star potential, assuming Kyler's the guy all year in Minnesota, and McCarthy was so bad. I don't see how that wouldn't be the case. And I still think 99% of the NFL would love to play for Kevin O'Connell. I still would follow him into a burning building. I realized last year the building was burning down, and it wasn't a fun season in Minnesota, but I love that strategy. And yet, as you mentioned, even if you go into your room, okay, these quarterbacks are going too early. I'm out on Burrow. I'm out on May or Jackson, whoever. There comes a point where you run into a bunch of people who all want to order blueberry pancakes, and maybe you have to say, you know what, I'm going to get the French toast. You have to be willing to pivot. All of this is written in pencil. And if the room, I mentioned that Fantasy Index draft, I would have told you the odds of me drafting Marvin Harrison in that draft were like 0. And then I got him available. I went with Hero RB, Robust RB. I drafted 2 running backs right off the rip. And I said, I got to catch up a receiver. And I kept pounding receiver. And there was Marvin Harrison available as my 5th receiver. Somebody I would have told you not to draft 10 minutes before we drafted. I'm like, I have to say yes to this. What's the downside? He's still, a guy who was a star at Ohio State. There's a lot of excused absence to what he's done the first couple of years. At least things are changing. I'm not sure how replicable what Wilson did last year, how much we can believe in that. So I'll take Harrison. I can't say enough. If you take nothing else from what I say, you don't have to agree with my ranks. You don't have to agree with my takes. You don't have to agree with my targets and fades. Be flexible. Whatever your strategy is, do it in pencil, because you're going to especially if you draft the volume that a lot of us are drafting, right? Nobody drafts one team anymore. Even people who are somewhat casual are going to have multiple teams. And if you're really into it, you're going to draft 5 teams, 10 teams, 20 teams, whatever it is. You're going to get into that room where you see an opportunity you never imagined. Maybe you're like, I'm never taking Josh Allen. And then you're in a room where everybody sits at quarterback and you get to a round, you don't like anybody. You're like, you know what? Josh Allen kind of makes sense right now. So I can't say enough to make your strategy and go over it, take your reps, but make sure it's in pencil because you might need to pivot.
There was a guy, one of my buddies actually started playing. He never played FFPC before. He played in a lot of other fantasy leagues. He had played in a lot of these weird leagues with, really, I don't say archaic, but just bizarre rules like that. And so like, there's really no way to prep for these drafts because of all the crazy stuff. And then I told him I work for FFPC. We have this main event. You can play for $1 million. He's like, oh yeah, I'm totally in. So he's drafting a main event team. And he had done like a mock draft or something where he mapped out exactly. He's like, because he knew his draft spot. He's like, I'm going to get this guy here. I'm going to get this guy here. And he was so rigid, right, in the way he was drafting. And I didn't say anything to him. And I'm like, I don't think this is going to end up well. And then sure enough, he didn't change anything in his process. He didn't match what the draft was giving him. He stayed true to what he wanted in the rounds he wanted it that he decided before the draft started. And I think his team won 3 games that season. Like it wasn't good. I think the best players are the people, as you mentioned, that don't go in with a set strategy, that just one develops based on how the rest of the draft is treating you. And then you know what you have to do. You talk about what you did, running back. Obviously you're going to be pounding receivers later. You don't want to go in, say we had, this is a great, we had a live big gorilla draft on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour last Friday, and we had one guy come in, and God, I can't remember his name. He came on the show too. I feel bad about this, but he thought he was going to go running back to start, and then at the 108, Jackson Smith-Njigba was still out there, so he's like, looks like I'm not going running back. And then I can't remember, another receiver fell to him in the second round. So he went receiver. I think he started off with 4 receivers when he thought he was starting off running back. And his team turned out pretty good. I thought his team was pretty excellent, but that's just another example of understanding that you don't know what other people are going to do in the moment. You have to understand what value is coming to you and be ready to scoop up that value and have the flexibility to scoop up that value as well.
Yeah. It'd be like if you had plans to play poker and you say, well, are you going to play aggressively? Are you going to play conservatively? Are you going to be 3-betting a lot? Are you going to be playing more, kind of lying in the weeds? You don't know. You have to see who's at the table, and it's a shifting dynamic. And then the game changes. Somebody's up money, somebody's stuck, somebody's drinking, whatever it is. Your draft is the exact same way, especially, by the way, if you're playing the salary cap / auction format, right? You constantly have to be aware of who's got money, who's got leverage. Are people nominating players they want? Are people nominating players they don't want? Are people running up bids really quickly where you have to make quick decisions? Are people walking up bids really slowly where you can have more time to maybe gather your thoughts and even do a quick bit of research if you need to on a player? Every room is different, and you have to be willing to adjust to it. And again, I can't say enough how important it is just to get the reps in and to be open-minded when you get to that table on that draft night.
Yeah, and it's what makes it so much fun is the challenge of being able to do that successfully as well. I think that I'll just couch this next question telling you the way I do it. When I'm drafting, Scott, I feel like in the first few rounds, I don't mind swinging for the doubles. I don't like taking big swings on players that have a higher probability of busting. But as the draft goes on, and I don't think it's halfway through. I think it's maybe about a third of the way through or so. Then I start taking my home run swings. And I think that's how I handle it. I'm not saying that's right. I don't even know if it's right. But it's the way I've usually done it. Do you think it's more important to try to avoid mistakes when you're drafting? Or are you of the opinion, especially when you're drafting for $1 million, are you trying to chase upside that can be that definitive player that gets you a 7-figure purse?
I agree with you that there's times in the draft, there's shapes of drafts where both concepts make a lot of sense, even though they're opposite concepts. I think one of my maybe leaks as a fantasy player used to be that I was so floor driven that maybe I didn't flick that switch over. And I still think being floor driven early in the draft makes a lot of sense, because anybody who is deserved to go in the first, second, or third round has upside too. It's not like you're taking players who can't be needle movers for you because they wouldn't go in that round if they didn't have that capability. But I think there's a point where you switch over to upside has to rule the day. And it's taken me some time to accept that happens earlier than I might have said, it's halfway through your draft. It's 8 rounds through your draft. It's 6 rounds. It's 10 rounds. Now I think it's more like by the 3rd or 4th round, every player has fleas anyway. You might as well just draft ceiling outcomes. And also draft as if you're right. Okay. So if you believe, and again, I know I'm banging this over the head, but there's different versions of this. If you believe that Herbert and McConkey is the right answer, and you've already landed on McConkey, and there's Herbert, and you might think, you start to hear in your back of your voice, well, maybe I should diversify. Maybe I should take Trevor Lawrence or Dak Prescott instead. What if the Chargers aren't good? What if McConkey isn't? No. Draft like you're already right, and give yourself, again, especially if you're playing in formats where there is that big pie in the sky that you're chasing. I've tried, Eric, to learn over the years that this game shifts to upside. That's all that matters. And also, you're going to turn over so much of the back of your roster anyway. And those are guys we talked about. You want the quickly determined player. Is he in? Binary. Is he in? Out? Move on. We don't want the slow developing Polaroid. We don't want the Brandon Ayuk. We want a player who's going to quickly identify for us if he's valuable or if we can cut him. And I always say this too: if you never make a cut that you don't regret during a fantasy season, much like if you never get caught bluffing in poker, you're playing far too conservatively. You just have to make some tough decisions sometimes. And inevitably, every year, I'm going to cut somebody who somebody else gets on their team and as a value. That's just part of the game. But I have always been a floor-driven guy, and it's taken me a while to properly shift that floor early is fine. But I do think upside is more important in the grand scheme of things.
Scott Barrett from Fantasy Points always says upside wins championships, right? And I think that's definitely true. In regards to upside, can we pursue that too much? I guess we're kind of in agreement that we can, right? I always say, Scott, the NFL, it's a young man's game, right? And if I'm deciding between two players, regardless of position, and one of them is 23 and the other one's 29 or 30, I usually side with the 23-year-old guy. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, but I'm just saying, like, I usually go with the young guy. But can we be too upside focused in drafts? Maybe early in the draft, the first couple rounds, maybe that's where it comes back to bite us. I don't know.
I like to have a mixture of it, right? You talked about, we talked about Brian Thomas earlier, and is he going to be that sacrificial X? Is he going to be running downfield routes? If I find myself building a roster where Thomas makes sense, I'll want to balance that out with somebody who has more easy targets, who may be more of a reliable PPR scorer or target catch guy week in, week out, to balance that out. I feel like that mixes well. That's a good cocktail when I mix those types of players. And that's the whole thing with it, is a balance where it's not, I'm never going to draft. Some people say, well, if you're not first, you're last. I'm just going to draft with my hair on fire the entire draft. I think that's a mistake. I think you're going to miss good value opportunities because you're wired a certain way. So I don't want to lock myself out of that. I think you need a balance. That's my answer on that.
It could be fun to draft that way, but after the draft, you're kind of like, oof, this could blow up on me for sure. I missed this before, Scott, but Lee Snyder had a question in the YouTube chat. Is there a rookie wide receiver you really like that's going between, say, rounds 15 or later? Now, I have the Big Gorilla ADP in front of me, and I'll be honest with you, there's not a whole lot of players, rookie wide receivers that I like, 15th round or later. The list is pretty short. You're looking at DeJon Stribling, Zechariah Branch, Chris Bell, Malachi Fields, Ted Hurst, Jacoby Lane, Jeremy Bernard, and Skylar Bell. Those are the rookie wide receivers currently going after the 15th round. I don't know if maybe Fields because of the opportunity in New York. I guess I have been drafting Stribling late in best ball because of the draft capital that they soaked into him, and I know he's going to be on the field. And he's going to be competing for targets with two guys that have had problems with injury over the last few seasons, Mike Evans and Ricky Pearsall. So I guess Stribling would probably be my answer. But outside of that, man, I don't know. I'm not seeing a whole lot of path to victory with any of these guys.
Yeah, nobody certainly who's become a proactive pick for me, although the case you lined out for Stribling is interesting. Anytime you can get invested with Kyle Shanahan. And again, I think Brock Purdy is so underrated. If you don't want to drink all the Herbert optimism I'm trying to pour tonight, maybe apply it to Herbert a little bit cheaper, who I think is a screaming get. But I also could see Chris Bell as the type of player who I don't draft. Somebody else drafts him, he's dropped, and then he's picked up when he's useful in the second half of the year. Miami, obviously, they're just starting from scratch. I don't know if Malik Willis is going to be a thing or not. They could be one of the worst offenses in football, but they're still going to have some production. They have to throw the ball to somebody. And just the people he's chasing, you would think maybe they would add somebody. Still some good veteran receivers we talked about earlier who haven't found homes yet. So at some point, they're willing just to take any check they can get. Maybe Miami will throw a line to a Diggs or an Allen or somebody like that. But I think Chris Bell is somebody you don't draft, but you're open-minded to getting maybe in the middle of the season if things start to trend positively for him.
Yeah, it's tough with Bell because the bye weeks are going to hit probably before he's healthy. And then you have that guy clogging up your roster.
For sure.
For honestly, for what's the return on that? I mean, you're probably gonna have to wait for him till November, December to actually do anything anyway. So and Bell, by the way, I love in Dynasty. I've been drafting him at the end of the first round for rookie drafts, sometimes getting him in the early second. That I'm excited about. Redraft, it's a little bit different. Robust running back we mentioned. There's zero wide receiver. There is hero running back. There is elite tight end. I've seen zero wide receiver, zero running back. Both of them play in the FFPC where you can start 4 running backs or 4 receivers every week. Is there a strategy that you believe, I don't want to say has been played out, but maybe overrated, something that you think does not return on the success that a lot of people think it does?
It's more of a secondary strategy. It's not as frontline as some of the things that you were mentioning, which I feel like any draft strategy, you have to first answer the question, how are you approaching running back? Every draft strategy is a running back strategy, even if you don't necessarily label it as such, because you're either going after it hard, you're going after it somewhat, or you're ignoring it. So all of us are doing one of those 3 things, whether it's in the actual planning or the actual execution. But a secondary concept I think is being overdone. And I'll look at this and consider it a little bit as a tiebreaker. But I talked about this a little bit earlier. This idea that I'm going to dominate December. I'm going to look at week 15, week 16, week 17, and I know the matchups. I know where the points are coming from, and I know what defenses I'm going to exploit. The NFL is such a snow globe league. Good teams get bad. Bad teams get good. Look at all the name brand teams that didn't make the playoffs last year. The Chiefs, the Ravens, the Lions. Not that any of those teams were horrible. We talked about the Patriots having a massive improvement in wins. Right now, there's a team that won 4 or 5 or 6 games last year. It's going to make the playoffs. There's a couple of playoff teams. Even Carolina doesn't really count because they were bad anyway. But there are some teams we think are good right now that are going to be bad. I like to play fantasy football, Eric, with a microscope, not a telescope. What does that mean? I want to identify what's in front of me, dominate in September if I can, dominate what's, we talked about players sometimes, can they produce early? Some of these guys, if they're going to take too long, let them percolate in somebody else's roster, let them be on the waiver wire. Maybe you'll jump in later in the season, maybe even get them next year. It's okay. You can't draft everybody, but I want to focus on what's in front of me. I think if you're going to navigate the schedule at all, I think you'd be better off doing it in September than you are in December. And again, these are still kind of tiebreakers no matter how you want to slice it, but we know more about team strength for September than we do. By December comes, teams will be tanking, weather could pop up, who knows what defensive players will be hurt by then, and cluster injuries. You'll think of the cluster injuries the Lions had a couple of years ago on defense, like 8 or 9 of their guys were on IR, just crazy. So right now there's 4 or 5 defenses you don't want to face that are actually going to be bad. There are a bunch of bad defenses that won't be as bad. Weather may become a factor. I'm not going to look 6 months ahead and try to draft with that as a proactive strategy. I'm not saying people go into their drafts entirely based on that, but I think people factor it in more than I'm comfortable doing.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? I mean, it is a long season. Things change a lot year after year. The NFL designs its schedule for teams that were bad one year to be good the next year. Like they want to increase parity as much as possible. You mentioned the injury aspect, the weather aspect. I'll throw another one at you. And I think about Billy Bob Thornton's character from Friday Night Lights, where he's in the car with Lucas Black, and he says to him, I think they're going to the coin flip to see who, gets to go to the playoffs or whatever. And he says, one of the things I've learned is that the line between winning and losing really isn't that much. And you think about what greatness is at the grade school level, the high school level, collegiate, pro, like you're going up with elite talent all around you. It gets tougher and tougher and tougher. And I think in the NFL, you don't even have to look at injuries or schedules or anything like that. You can just look at it from the standpoint of these are the best people on the planet at this. Some days they're going to be really good, and some days they're not going to be as good because of how hard it is to compete consistently and win at that level. And so, you could have a player like a middle linebacker or something. He's all over the field one week, 12 tackles, fumble recovery, interception, looks great. And then the next week he's getting blown off the ball by a really good guard or so, so it's not even like the injury aspect of it. It's just the talent level. It's so difficult to predict on any given week who is going to be crushing it and who is going to be getting crushed.
Very well said. The margins are so thin. When people lose a close playoff game or even just a close regular season game, and they point to the last thing that happened on Monday night is the reason they lost. If you lose a close game, you lost because of rounding error. You lost because some statistician had to decide if that was a 3-yard gain or a 4-yard gain. You lost because of maybe an offensive play where it's not clear if the defense should take a penalty, and they said, no, let them have the play, or vice versa. Sometimes those are borderline calls. You lost because somebody who was inbounds was ruled out of bounds, or vice versa, or somebody was tackled at the 1-inch line. Maybe he got over the line, but the team had no challenges left. Stuff like that.
Right.
The tiniest things.
The minutia.
Right, for sure. The butterfly effect, right? I mean, how is everything different? What if Tom Brady's drafted by the Browns? How are things different? What if Trent Green never gets hurt for the Rams? Does Kurt Warner never become a thing? I think back to Drew Brees. Chargers. He's not working out. Marty Schottenheimer falls in love with Phillip Rivers. They draft him. And Rivers signs late that year. He doesn't sign until, I think, late August. So Brees had to be the quarterback because they didn't have time to get Rivers up to speed. And Brees played at a Pro Bowl level. He played so well that he bought himself a second year with the Chargers. Now, at that point, they have to get Rivers going. They've invested too much in him. So all these sliding doors. So what if Rivers signs on time? Maybe Brees never gets a chance. And then Brees becomes a free agent. He goes to Miami, not sure where the shoulder's at. fails his physical, or they basically decided no bueno on the physical. What if Nick Saban and Drew Brees were a thing in Miami? Is Nick Saban the king of Miami? There's statues of Nick Saban everywhere. Who knows? He goes to New Orleans. Obviously, him and Peyton have the wonderful run that they have, although it's still amazing to me they never got back to that second Super Bowl. That's another thing with Drake May, by the way. A lot of Patriots people will be like, oh, yeah, Drake May, first Super Bowl of many. Yeah, maybe. Dan Marino never got back. Yep. Aaron Rodgers never got back. Drew Brees never got back. It's hard. Warren Moon never played in a conference championship game, let alone a Super Bowl. Yes, Mahomes run good. Yes, Brady run good. There are some guys who went to a bunch of them. Montana famously won the 4 Super Bowls, but it's hard to get there, man. It's hard. If you had told me, Eric, after Marino's rookie season that he'd be ostensibly healthy his whole career, I know he had that 1 year with the knee got broken, but or the ACL, whatever it was, but never get back to a Super Bowl, even though they're making the playoffs just about every year and usually winning a game in the playoffs just about every year. It blows my mind. Yeah. That's the way that ran. So the margins are so thin. That's the bottom line to if you win a game by 30, 40, 50 points, fine. That was always going to go that way. And you lose games like that sometimes too. But when you're in close games, appreciate. I talk about poker a lot. You want to put yourself in good situations, but sometimes it's just going to come down, okay, I'm 52-48. I hope I run good for the next 2 cards.
That's exactly. Lee Snyder has one other question here, and this is an interesting one. So the bye weeks in weeks 13 and 14, those are the league playoff weeks in the Big Gorilla, the main event. Do you shy away from players on those buys in the early rounds? Jonathan Taylor is one that he brings up as an example this year.
Generally, when bye weeks are far enough in the future, I talked about the microscope over telescope. I'm more likely just to say, okay, I'm going to deal with my roster now, and I'll worry about that. If I have 2 players who have similar profiles, and I can draft one who has a later bye week and one who has an earlier bye week, that might be a way I break the tie. I want to make it clear, this is not a main determinant for me. This is like a tiebreaker of a tiebreaker of a tiebreaker, but generally speaking, a later bye week to me is better than an earlier bye week because I have more definition. I have more time to shape my roster. And the way your roster looks now is going to look so. Please don't draft like, oh, okay, I'm going to draft for week 10 or week 11. This player has this bye week. This player has that bye week. I want to make sure those things mesh. As long as you're in a league that allows trades or pickups or some sort of roster maneuverability, you don't need to have that sorted out now. So long as your whole team isn't sitting in week 6 or something like that. I generally I kick the can down the road when I can, but other than that, I'll just get to it when I get to it.
I think that's the way I've always looked at it as well. I play in the KFFSC, which is very similar to the FFPC, and I don't look at that at all with bye weeks because I just feel like I'm going to have 3 months or whatever it is to make sure I have a replacement on my roster for that guy who's on the bye week. And who's to say he's even going to be healthy at that point anyway, So I just feel like there's so much other stuff going on. And Lee, and I don't think that's a dumb question, by the way. I think it's a good question because people ask it all the time.
It is a good question. Eric, a lot of times I'll look at end of a season, my best teams. I'll look back at those drafts or the people who won my leagues or the people who dominated what went right. And yes, there are going to be some years where you just drafted so well and things fell right. And you ran pure, and that's great when that happens. It's very rare and appreciate it when it does. But sometimes I've had winning seasons or great teams, and I've looked back at the draft. I'm like, wow, how did this end up being a great team?
Yeah.
And it's because I don't see then the trade I made or the pickup I made or something that changed in the NFL that I was able to take advantage of, or even just getting lucky on stuff. I mean, we'd love to say that we win because we're skilled, we lose because we're unlucky, but let's be more open-minded to that. A lot of times you win because a couple of breaks went your way, and sometimes you had a bad process and you deserve that bad season. I try to be open-minded with my results in any competitive environment, but bottom line, it blows my mind and I play fantasy hockey, I play fantasy baseball, I play fantasy golf. I do a lot of March Madness stuff. Just the shape of the way I start is going to be so different than the way things finish. It always blows my mind, even as an experienced fantasy player.
I'll bring this up too. And Joe King posted that McCaffrey was on bye during the playoffs that year. It kind of hurt. I will say, yeah, if you don't have him available, it stinks in the moment. But remember, you got all those weeks that he played prior to. Maybe you wouldn't even been in the league playoffs if it wasn't for McCaffrey playing every single week. You don't know. I mean, we're living in the Matrix now. We can't go back and recork the wine, as it were, because everything plays out differently. This has been so much fun, Scott. I want to take our final break. When we come back, we'll do a little rapid fire on the walk-off with some player analysis, We'll also get into some draft philosophy as well. You're watching the FFPC Insider Access right here on the FFPC YouTube channel. Don't go anywhere. Scott Pianowski from Yahoo returns. We'll wrap things up right after this. Be back in 90 seconds, everybody.
Drafting a main event team on FFPC, $2,000 entry team. Grand prize of $1 million.
I'm looking for that $1 million top prize.
Main event season is in full swing.
The FFPC main event has live and slow drafts going on right now as the FFPC Big Gorilla. Don't forget $1 million grand prizes in both of those. Chasing a $400K grand prize and a $100K grand prize in the best ball tournament and Superflex best ball tournament, respectively, in the FFPC right now. Don't forget about the Baby Gorilla, Dynasty Startups, Empire Dynasty Startups, Play Player One, draft against 11 smart FFPC CPU users. It's been a lot of fun for a lot of people so far. Check that out. And then, of course, Chop Leagues available now at myffpc.com. Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy joins us here tonight. Last 15 minutes, I don't want to say we'll go rapid fire on this, because I don't know if it would pay off these answers, but we could go fairly quickly, Scott, or just go at our own pace. Ashton Genty, a lot of people are saying he is the RB3 in Dynasty Startup Leagues. Is that the way you see it as well, or are you worried that the hype is getting up there with Genty, even coming off of a quote-unquote down year?
It comes down to how you feel about Kubiak. I'm a believer in him. I think they've at least improved the offensive line. I think all I ask is this team just be a bona fide, competent NFL team. Just be like a 6-11, 5-12, type of team. Be competitive. Keep the game scripts in a reasonable area. I don't want to say them all the way in, pound the table on Genty, but I feel like I like him more than the market does, at least a little bit.
For those people that are lucky enough to get the 101 in FFPC drafts, I think a lot of people have made up their mind. I mean, so you still see Nakua, you still see Chase every now and then, but it's mostly either Robinson or Gibbs. Which horse are you backing at the 101, Robinson or Gibbs, Scott?
I want to strongly say that you should take one of those two guys. I think there's enough of a drop off at running back, and you can get luckier at receiver that I want to play it that way. I know this isn't a satisfying answer, but if I knew I had this pick 10 times, I'd probably split it 7-3 or 6-4, but I do lean Robinson. I think the target competition, touch competition is maybe a little bit more narrow there. And we have a little bit more proof of concept over a full season. Gibbs is a wonderful player. Don't get me wrong, although they will find something for other backs to do, but I ever so slightly lean to Robinson.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Well, would you prefer the aged Wagyu or the caviar? It's a champagne problem, as Taylor Swift would tell us. The sophomore running back that you believe in betting on the most this year, I'm going to take Quinshon Judkins out of this equation because we kind of talked about him already. But let me frame it this way, because Omarion Hampton is going significantly higher than Trevion Henderson. Who is the better value, Scott? Do you think that Omarion Hampton going at the 203 is still a better investment than Trevion Henderson, who is going at 501 as the running back 21?
I was really hoping Hampton would be a half to maybe even a full round cheaper in the market. Again, all I've done for the last 2 hours is hype the Chargers, but
right.
I am in on Hampton. Also with the Patriots, I mean, Henderson up and down rookie year. Stevenson's going to have a role. May's going to run for 470 and 4 or something like that. He'll take something off the table. They have improved their wide receiver room, so there's going to be maybe a spreading issue or the targets that the distribution of the offense may be a little bit wider than we want. I realize this is an apples and oranges question because they have different ADPs. Hampton needs to be good in the second round, where if Henderson didn't work out where he worked out, most of your league is going to miss on those picks anyway. It's not nearly as penal. But I'll answer it this way. At the end of the draft season, I think I'm going to have more Hampton than Henderson.
Yeah, I think it's tough because, well, we need to get into it, but it's obviously, a second round pick. There's a lot of players around Hampton that I like there quite a bit too. Henderson, I have been getting quite a bit as a running back 2 or sometimes running back 3, depending upon how my team is building. And I do like him this year. Those are the young guys. Is there an older guy? I know we mentioned Tony Pollard in the first hour, Scott. Is there an older running back that you think people are kind of just being out on a year or maybe even 2 years too early?
Yeah, Pollard would have been a good answer for this, but since we talked about him so much, I'll give you another answer. This is not that this guy's old so much, although he's a veteran, but people are so underwhelmed by Chuba Hubbard, and I get it. A lot of the efficiency metrics don't point his way, but he's got this money. It's been so long since Brooks has been an effective player. I think Chuba Hubbard is going to be an inconvenient truth for a lot of people, and he's set up to be a nice value. You can probably get him as your third or fourth back on some builds, certainly your third back and maybe even your fourth back in some builds. And if I'm going here, especially if I'm going hero RB, where I get that one really good running back I like in the first couple of rounds, then I'm going with receivers probably for a few rounds, maybe a tight end. Hubbard would make a lot of sense in that type of build. He's somebody I'm more open-minded to than I think the market might be.
I think it was last week when Brooks officially passed Hubbard in ADP in the FFPC Big Gorilla. Brooks running back 29 at the 705, Hubbard running back 32 at the 710. And I was drafting him like in the double-digit rounds back in like February, where everybody forgot about Brooks essentially. And now it's seeing that you have to pony up a 7th round pick in order to get him on your roster. One of the questions that people were asking me, Scott, when I was drafting him in like the 15th round, were like, you understand that this guy has torn the same ACL twice. He can't stay healthy or whatever. Those are still things. Like those are still real questions about Brooks right now. And it's fine if the Panthers believe that eventually Brooks is going to take over that running back 1 role. Good for him if he does it. He's got to stay on the field to do it. And if he can't, and if the last couple of seasons mirror what has happened in his career so far, then Hubbard looks like a great value at the end of the 7th round. An inconvenient truth, as you called it, which I think is appropriate here. Is there a running back, and maybe Hubbard applies to this, is there a running back currently being drafted outside the top 25 backs that has a good chance of finishing as a top 10, or I shouldn't say a good chance, but a decent chance of finishing as a top 10 or maybe a top 12 running back this year?
Yeah, I would have said that Hubbard and Pollard would be reasonable answers here, but a guy I'll mention who I think the fantasy industry is split on is Blake Corum. So look, Kyron Williams is a good player, and he's more involved at the goal line, and he's more involved certainly in the passing game. But Corum was a more effective runner, and I realize they have different roles. The idea is Williams going to start the game, maybe tire out the defense. Maybe Corum a lot of times gets those secondary carries where the defense has been, the body blows and everything, they've been worn down a little bit. Sometimes you're set up to succeed in those ways. But was a dynamic running back at Michigan. I don't think he can't catch the ball. Maybe he's not dynamic as a receiver, but it's not like he's going to be a zero in the passing game. And I could tell myself a story that, first of all, if Williams gets hurt, obviously it's wheels up for Corum. Here we go, goes to the moon, top 10, top 12 running back in everybody's rank sheet. But I mean, that's a cheat. I mean, if we know what running backs are going to get hurt, of course we want primary backups on those teams. That's, nobody needs to be told that. But I could even see a scenario where if they're both healthy all year, where Corum has just as many touchdowns with Williams, or maybe even has a couple more, just the way game flow runs, or maybe all Williams needs is a fumble at the goal line, or maybe if Corum has a day where he plunges in a couple of times and they start pressing that button more often. Yeah. Blake Corum is somebody I'm going to draft proactive. I've already started to do it, and I'm going to continue to draft him proactively. Is probably a running back 4 on your opening day build.
Yeah, Corum I do like this year as well. It just seems like he is narrowing the gap with the production in Los Angeles with him and Kyron Williams. Brooks would probably apply to this next one as a breakout that, quote unquote, everybody sees coming, right? But that doesn't happen. Is there another player that you would think fall in that category where everybody is over their skis? They can't wait to draft this guy, because this is 2026 is going to be the big season that everybody remembers as him making his mark on the league. And then maybe it goes out with a whimper this year, Scott. Is there anybody you see in the draft right now that's like that?
I'm going to tiptoe as I say this because I feel like I'm walking on broken glass, but the industry is universally praising Luther Burden, and I get it.
Yeah.
He's a great player. He really splashed at the end of last year. They got rid of DJ Moore. Caleb Williams has shown that he can play. Obviously, we like Ben Johnson with the play sheet. But, Dunze, and I realize he's a health concern right now. He's obviously got talent. Colston Loveland is a tight end people are really excited about. Swift is going to be heard from. Williams has run a little bit more than we thought as a pro. There's still a lot of moving parts of this offense. And what I think is going to happen with Burden is his helium. The expectations are going to continue to rise. And people are going to be running to social media to report how early Burden was drafted, like in the middle of August, late August, or those Labor Day drafts right before the season starts, which are always so much fun. I just think his ADP is going to continue to rise. And I just want to ask myself, why couldn't Loveland lead the team in touchdowns? Why couldn't Adunze beat Burden if he was healthy, right? I mean, how do I know that it has to be the Luther Burden show? So even though I see the root of the optimism and I can get behind it, I just think the ADP has gotten to a place where I'm not comfortable paying it right now.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, I know there's plenty of Odunze people out there that are telling you that he's actually the guy that you want given cost right now over Burden. And quite frankly, sometimes I'm doing that in drafts as well. Let's do one more here. These guys are both top 5 quarterbacks by ADP and dynasty startups in the FFPC right now. Scott, who would you rather have as your dynasty quarterback, Caleb Williams or Drake May? Try to put your fandom aside here on this one.
Honestly, if I was building a team, I'd rather have May. If I was building a fantasy team, I'd rather have Caleb Williams.
Okay. All right. So it is Williams there. So you get the good and the bad, Bears fans. Burden, no. Caleb Williams, yes, from Scott Pianowski. And one other thing that I have to bring up here, because we can't let you get out of here without doing this. I'm trying to find it right here in the chat from Joe King. Oh, yeah, here it is right here, Scott. I'm here for Scott's music recommendations. Is there anything that you can recommend as your walk-off here to the viewers tonight of what you're listening to, or what, more importantly, what we should be listening to that you are?
One of my favorite albums of the last 20 years is, or maybe 25 years, 2000s and above, Block Party, their Silent Alarm album. Like Eating Glass is a great breakup song. This Modern Love is one of the just most beautiful songs about being unsure about who you are, but allowing yourself to be vulnerable and fall in love anyway. And so Here We Are is just a pensive song that will spiral your mind into 10 or 20 different cascades as you drive down the road, or listen to it on a rainy day. So check out Block Party, Silent Alarm.
There you go. Block Party, Silent. And I'll tell you this right now. Every couple of years, I just get on an Arcade Fire kick. I listen to The Suburbs. I think that was the one for album.
Modern Man, one of my favorite songs.
It's such a good song. And that is one of and maybe I'm just getting fickle as an older man now, but it's tougher and tougher for me to sit and listen to an album all the way through. But that one I definitely can. It's so much good music on there. And I don't think it happens to everybody. I don't know if they'll ever touch that again. Their next couple of albums, I thought they were okay. But The Suburbs, man, that is magnifique. One of my favorites.
You know what else was one of my favorite things to do is take a song you really like and then go on your music player of choice, plug in that song and see what aggregated music comes along with it. And if you really love, like I really love Rock and Roll Woman by Buffalo Springfield, or I really love Everybody's Talking by Harry Nilsson, and I'll plug that in. It's like, oh my God, the next 15 songs have been fantastic. It's so common where that happens. And if you do it, another thing that's fun to do is if you do that with a song of a band that maybe you don't know that well, you'll get the aggregation of songs that you don't know. You're being introduced to new music. Like I wish I loved the Hold Steady maybe as much as some other people do. Joe Dolan of Fantasy Points, a good friend of mine and one of my favorite people in the space. He's a huge Hold Steady fan. I've only really loved 2 of their songs, Stuck Between Stations, which is terrific, and Chips Ahoy. But if I plug in Stuck Between Stations, it will push me to songs of the last 20 to 25 years. Because, I'm encyclopedic 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I feel like I know that stuff really inside and out, backwards and forwards. But there are gaps in my musical knowledge and reps and routes over the last 20 to 25 years. So sometimes I'll plug in one of those songs to get some of the newer music that I might be missing, or you can always go to a friend and get recos as we're doing here. I'll mention just one other album, by the way, the 1990s if you love alternative rock, if you love female lead singers, I think Belly is just a grossly underrated band.
Feed the Tree, right?
And that was on their Star album. I think
Okay.
their King album, their second album, is actually better. And I would recommend, if you like alternative music and around that era, Tanya Donnelly, who was part of Throwing Muses, she has great solo work as well. Love Songs for Underdogs is a terrific album. In fact, my dad, I used to make him mix CDs every once in a while. I'm not sure if he ever would play them or not. I put Belly's song Thief on a mixtape for him, mix CD. He played it. We never talked about it. Several years later, I'm with my dad. I said, I want you to hear this song. I played a Tanya Donnelly song solo. And 5 seconds in, he goes, this sounds like Belly, which is Tanya Donnelly's band. And I have never been more proud of my father than, who was a lot older than I was. We lost him a few years ago, but just one of the nicest people. I talked about him on Father's Day on Twitter. Go and read that if you can. But anything with Tanya Donnelly in it, whether it's Throwing Muses, whether it's certainly Belly and her solo music as well. Check out that King CD. It's if you like pop / alternative music, jangle pop from the 90s. It doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. We could do another hour on music here, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. You mentioned a post that you made on X about your father on Father's Day. People can check that out, x.com/Scott_Pianowski. All your stuff is yahoo.com. Is it what's the best? Is it yahoo.com/fantasy? Is that the best website to go to?
Sure. Or if you just search my name and Scott Pianowski, Yahoo, Matt Harmon, Yahoo, Justin Boone, Yahoo, any of that will get you there. But a lot of exciting stuff. I wish I could talk about all of it. There's some stuff we can't let out of the genie out of the bottle yet, but there's some really cool stuff coming with Yahoo fan. And I know stuff that you, Eric, are specifically going to like. So I can't say more than that, but there's a lot of good stuff coming. So please keep your eyes open for Yahoo this year.
Yeah, I'll be on the edge of my seat for sure. You guys got a great team there. I can't wait to see what comes out of it. Scott, keep up the great work. Normally I promo this after I bid you adieu, but next week, 7:00, my guest on the show from Fantasy Points and SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, Joe Dolan. And maybe I can ask him about the Hold Steady.
So good. He loves the Hold Steady. Joe Dolan's a great guy. Fantasy Points, with John Hansen and Graham Barfield. You mentioned Scott Barrett, Joe Dolan, Paul Kelly is part of that crew. Just one of the most underrated people.
Chris Wecht, who was on this show a couple of weeks ago too.
So good. You could not go wrong. I don't know how Hansen has recruited all these guys. He basically was the Dusty May of college basketball last year, where he's got this all-star team. His NIL budget must be unlimited, but yeah, great bunch of guys over there. And John Hansen was very influential in me getting a chance in the fantasy space. I'll never be able to repay that. But what I can say is Fantasy Points, man. In a golden era of enlightenment for fantasy, they're really doing a lot of great things over there.
I listened to the podcast that you did with Guru and Brian Drake.
Brian Drake.
Very entertaining. That was a good one for sure. Scott, this was a good one. I know the viewers enjoyed it, the listeners enjoyed it, or they will enjoy it as soon as I upload this podcast, the audio version. Thank you so much for being gracious with your time tonight. I'll let you get back in the lab. Really appreciate it. We'll have to do this again soon.
It was a blast, Eric. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Scott Pianowski, ladies and gentlemen, at Scott_Pianowski on X. That is going to complete our show for tonight. Don't forget about the big gorilla, the baby gorilla, the main event, both the best ball and Superflex best ball tournaments, the Dynasty and Empire startups we have going on at myffpc.com. Of course, Chop Leagues and Player One. Check it out, myffpc.com. We got leagues filling up right now. Go there. I guarantee you there's some that are very close to being filled, and you can draft right as this show ends. As I said, next Thursday, 7 p.m., Joe Dolan from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and Fantasy Points will be my co-host. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. For Scott Pianowski, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been FFPC Insider Access. Have a great weekend, everybody.